Chapter 909. Mu Qinghe was taken aback by the sudden shout, and he looked at the woman not far away. She was sitting there leisurely. Her clothes were very simple, but she still had a noble aura. She still had a smile on her youthful face, and her eyes were as bright as stars. She looked just like she did many years ago. However, she called him by his name in such a relaxed tone, as if the grudges of the past few years didn't exist at all. Mu Qinghe slowly clenched his fists in his sleeves and lowered his eyes. "It's just a normal meeting. Your Majesty, you don't have to worry." Mu Qinghe only gave a short answer. Then, he closed his mouth and didn't seem to have any intention of explaining. Jian Fengqi glanced at him as if he wanted to say something. He knitted his brows slightly, and hesitation flashed across his eyes. Even now, he still doesn't want to say anything. In fact, what Chu Luiwei asked was also what he wanted to ask. When the Imperial Ancestral Hall burned for a day and a night, even he was alarmed and rushed to the palace. In the end, Mu Qinghe was even later than him. Even he could see that there was something wrong with the princess's death. However, Mu Qinghe didn't express any objections from the beginning to the end. If it weren't for some things that happened later, Jian Fengqi would almost believe that he had completely betrayed Shangguanyu. If he was on Jiang Yuqing's side in the past because he cared about the big picture, now that Jiang Yuqing and Shangguanyu had been destroyed, what else could he say? Jian Fengqi really didn't understand. He wanted to help explain, but in fact, he didn't know much. Mu Qinghe was the only one who knew the reason for many of the things he did. If others said anything, it would only complicate the situation. What do you think? Chu Luiwei didn't seem surprised by Mu Qinghe's answer. He shrugged and looked at Jian Fengqi. Jian Fengqi's eyebrows twitched. It was just a small quarrel in the past. Come to think of it, there wasn't much conflict. Chu Luiwei smiled faintly, but his eyes seemed to have seen through everything. Jian Fengqi's words were stuck in his throat, and he couldn't say anything. He could not help but look at Mu Qinghe. Mu Qinghe lowered her head. No one knew what she was thinking. After a long time, he raised his head again and calmly said, "His Majesty sent out 3 requests for help that day, right?" Chu Luiwei slowly sat up straight and stared at him. Mu Qinghe put one hand behind her back and slowly clenched it, but her expression was calm. "Those 3 messages were intercepted by me. It was me who cut off His Majesty's last chance of survival that day." It was already the middle of June, and the weather was a little hot. People came and went on the streets, and it was very lively. Rong Xiu walked alone on the street. Because he wore a hood and restrained his aura, he didn't attract much attention. Most of the people around were still talking about her. Rong Xiu walked forward and listened to the discussions of the people around him. Every time he heard those people's exclamations of surprise and admiration, his thin scarlet lips would curl slightly. She could always do what she wanted to do. It wasn't that he didn't want to come and help, but in the end he still felt that it was better for her to give it her all. It was best for her to take back what she had lost. It was best for her to take revenge on her own. Only then could she completely wash away all the pain she had suffered. As for him, all he had to do was pass the knife to her whenever she needed it. Of course, the knife had to be fast enough. Just as he was thinking of this, he suddenly felt his surroundings darken. He raised his head to take a look and found that the sky that was previously clear and boundless was now suddenly filled with dark clouds and darkening. Soon, raindrops fell from his forehead. It was cold. He was walking in the direction of the 100 Herbs building, but he didn't expect that the weather would change halfway. The rain soon became heavier. The peddlers packed up and left one after another. White mist gradually appeared on the bluestone. There was only a curtain of rain between heaven and earth. Rong Xiu frowned slightly, and there was a deep look in his eyes. Then, he turned around and walked in another direction. The tall figure of the man quickly disappeared in the rain. After Chu Luiwei walked out of the Mu mansion alone, she walked aimlessly on the street. In her mind, she kept recalling what Mu Qinghe said just now. He admitted it. He said that he did it. What else did he say? Oh, right, he said that he was originally Jiang Yuqing's man. So, his betrayal was actually not a betrayal. It turned out that the truth was like this. Countless scenes flashed before her eyes. Chu Luiwei took a deep breath. The wind gradually rose, and the surrounding sky quickly darkened. She glanced up at him. It was stuffy, gloomy, and cold. She had already forgotten what kind of expression she had after hearing those words, and what kind of answer she gave. She didn't even know how she walked out of the Mu mansion. Suddenly she felt a furry touch. It was Dumpling squatting on her shoulder, gently rubbing her face. Chu Luiwei shook her head. "Dumpling, don't worry. I'm fine." She probably left hope for herself, thinking, but in this world, there weren't so many thinking. Chu Luiwei looked at the sky, and there was rain dripping. In the blink of an eye, it sped up, connecting the sky and the earth into lines. Chu Luiwei moved and was about to go back, but she suddenly felt a cold aura rushing toward her from the distance in the rain. She suddenly looked up. Alarm bells rang in her heart. A bluish-purple ball of light broke through the air. It was heading straight for her face. She staggered her feet and was about to make a move when she suddenly felt someone approaching her from behind quickly and grabbing her waist. At the same time, a silver blade of light flew out. It collided with the ball of light. It was as if a transparent barrier had appeared around him, and all the fluctuations were blocked outside. An extremely familiar cold fragrance hit her, and Chu Luiwei's heart suddenly beat faster. She turned around and saw that the person who came had a noble appearance and an astonishing aura. It was Rong Xiu. Rong Xiu? Why are you here? Chu Luiwei widened her eyes slightly. Rong Xiu hugged her tighter, and his other hand held a black umbrella. His voice was low and lazy. "It's raining. I'm here to hold the umbrella for you." Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 9-10. Her heart, which had been empty, seemed to be filled with something in an instant. Chu Luiwei subconsciously hugged his lean waist tightly and pressed her face against his chest. Listening to his strong heartbeat, it seemed to make the almost frozen blood in her body flow again. The heavy rain fell, and the cold wind blew everywhere. Countless ripples on the ground intertwined. Under the dark sky, only the two of them, who were tightly leaning against each other, could be seen. With a burst of eardrums, Chu Luiwei felt that her drifting thoughts were finally pulled back. Her numb limbs gradually regained their warmth, and the countless illusions in front of her disappeared little by little. Only Rong Xiu was left. Hugging and leaning on each other, it was so real. The black umbrella above her head stood up, as if it was blocking out all the wind and rain. His broad and warm embrace made her yearn for it. Chu Luiwei was in a daze. After a while, she said in a low voice, "Rong Xiu, I miss you so much." Rong Xiu frowned slightly. There was something wrong with her voice. She had always been smart, independent, and strong. No matter what kind of situation she encountered, she never seemed to panic. Even after experiencing such a betrayal, she still relied on her own strength to return all the pain she had suffered and take back everything that belonged to her. She seemed to be invincible. But in this world, how could any flesh and blood not know pain and suffering? It was just that someone was better at hiding it. He leaned closer, and his jade-like chin gently rested on her head. "I'm here, don't be afraid." It was a simple sentence, but it was his most cherished promise. Chu Luiwei's eyes suddenly became hot. Even if she was homeless and miserable, even if she was full of twists and turns, there would always be one person in this world who would appear and accompany her when she needed him most. He gave her courage and love. That was enough. She closed her eyes, dispersing the last bit of disappointment and regret in her heart. Anyway, it was not like she had not experienced a deeper blow. Now, this was nothing. At the very least, the current situation was still under her control. Bang! The sound of something exploding came from behind. Chu Luiwei looked up from Rong Xiu's arms and glanced back. She saw that the purplish-blue ball of light that was flying towards her had completely dissipated after colliding with Rong Xiu's power. At this moment, there was only something left that fell into the water. Pitter-patter, splashing a few drops of rainwater. Chu Luiwei looked over and vaguely saw that it was a thumb-sized object. It was glowing faintly in the water, but he couldn't see it clearly. "What's that?" Chu Luiwei asked curiously. Just now, she had clearly sensed that this thing was coming for her. The aura he felt at that moment was very unfamiliar. She thought for a moment, but she couldn't figure out who would do such a thing. "It's just a small toy," Rong Xiu said lightly. Chu Luiwei didn't know if it was an illusion, but she felt that Rong Xiu seemed to have recognized the origin of that thing, and there was a hint of coldness in his tone. Chu Luiwei gave Dumpling a look. Dumpling flew out and picked up the thing. Rong Xiu glanced at Dumpling, his eyes cold. Dumpling shuddered. Its strong desire to live made its wings tremble slightly, and it almost threw the thing out. Withstanding the huge pressure, it finally handed the thing to Chu Luiwei. Chu Luiwei stretched out her hand and was about to receive it when Rong Xiu, who was beside her, grabbed her hand. At the same time, a force flew out and hit the item. Bang! With a crisp sound, the thing cracked open. Then, a piece of paper flew out and unfolded automatically. It seemed to be a piece of white rice paper that was casually cut, but it floated in midair and didn't get stained by the raindrops at all. It was as if there was an invisible barrier around it. There were only 2 lines of words on that piece of paper. The first line was, "Shengguan Yu, congratulations." The second line was, "Your father is doing very well at Ai's place, don't miss him. We will meet again in a month's time." Just as Chu Luiwei finished reading, that piece of paper quickly combusted and turned into ashes, disappearing without a trace. Other than the faint smell of burning that filled the air, it was as if nothing had happened. But Chu Luiwei suddenly opened her eyes wide, and her heart was filled with shock. Because she had seen the handwriting on that piece of paper before. Back then, she had received a letter from Heaven's Canopy, and that letter had half a Xian formation as a seal. She had drawn the remaining half of the Xian formation before opening the letter. And that letter had written, "Shengguan Yu, long time no see." At that time, she hadn't told anyone about her identity, so after receiving that letter, she had thought about it for a long time, but she couldn't figure out who wrote the letter. After coming to Xiling, she had been busy with various things and had forgotten about this matter for a while. Until today, when she saw that piece of paper again, it must have been written by the same person, and the other party had obviously known about her identity a long time ago. It was even possible that the other party knew everything about her like the back of their hand. Needless to say, this congratulations was referring to her ascension to the throne. And her father was also deliberately taken away by the other party. Chu Luiwei frowned. This person, who exactly was it? At first, she thought that it was someone from the Tianling dynasty, but now it seemed that it wasn't the case. To be able to call himself I, and have such means, it was very likely that he came from outside the Tianling dynasty. Rong Xiu narrowed his eyes, and a cold glint flashed across the corner of his eyes. She was really haunting him. Chu Luiwei suddenly turned her head and looked at Rong Xiu. "You know who this is?" She had an inexplicable intuition that Rong Xiu seemed to know more than she expected. She didn't know where this feeling came from, but judging from Rong Xiu's reaction just now, it seemed that her guess was right. Rong Xiu's thin red lips moved slightly. Just as he was about to speak, a shout came from the corner of the street behind them. "Your Highness!" It was 13's voice. Chu Luiwei turned around and saw a slender young man running toward them quickly. His movements were nimble and free. It seemed that he didn't move much, but he was already in front of them. 13 came in the rain, but he was surrounded by a layer of enchantment, so he wasn't worried about getting wet. Because he was still young, Chu Luiwei almost never assigned tasks to 13. She only let him focus on cultivation. This also allowed 13 to come and go freely both inside and outside the palace. Today, he happened to meet Shengguan Yu. When he heard that it was related to his master, he immediately agreed and left the palace to look for him. When he was still a short distance away from Chu Luiwei, 13 shouted excitedly, "Your Highness, the retired emperor was worried that you would be out alone for too long, so he asked me to send you an umbrella and take you back to the palace. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network." Chapter 9:11. Suddenly, 13's voice stopped abruptly, and he stopped in his tracks. He looked at the scene in front of him in shock. Someone was holding an umbrella for Her Highness. More importantly, he was hugging Her Highness. With such an intimate gesture, anyone could tell that the relationship between the two was not ordinary. Who are you? 13 had come happily to bring Chu Liwei back to the palace, but when he saw this scene, he felt uncomfortable. Without waiting for Chu Liwei to speak, Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows and said calmly, "I'm Yu's fiancé." 13's eyes widened in shock, and his mouth dropped open. "You're Her Highness's fiancé? Didn't Her Highness just settle Jiang Yuqing and Shangguanwan? How did she suddenly have a fiancé?" Because 13 was young, no one told him about this, so he was especially shocked at first glance. Chu Liwei was thinking, what did 13 say just now? He seemed to have mentioned the retired emperor? Based on Rong Xiu's intelligence, he would have sensed something wrong with this sentence and guessed her identity. "You said just now, who asked you to bring you back?" Sure enough, Rong Xiu spoke casually and directly. Chu Liu's eyebrows twitched. 13 was about to reply, but he saw that there was something wrong with Her Highness's eyes, so he covered his mouth. "Rong Xiu, I have something to tell you." Chu Liwei originally wanted to find a suitable time to tell him everything, but she didn't expect that the moment the two of them met she had no choice but to say it now. Rong Xiu looked down at her. There was a trace of embarrassment on his face, but there was an undetectable trace of a smile at the corner of his lips. Was she embarrassed that she had not been honest with him about those things before? Rong Xiu's voice was low. This low rhetorical question seemed to come from his chest, pressing tightly against his heart and brushing past his eardrums. It was pleasing to the ear and numbing. Chu Liwei blushed slightly, but she held his hand gently and firmly, their fingers intertwined. "Come with me." 6 Cloud Street, Chu Estate. The rain had just stopped, and in the quiet and leisurely courtyard, there was already a shallow accumulation of rainwater. Water droplets continuously dripped from the eaves and fell into it, creating a circle of ripples. The air after the rain was moist and sweet. 13 stood outside the door, waiting anxiously and impatiently. From time to time, he would glance at the tightly shut door. Her Highness and that man had been in there for a long time and still hadn't come out. From His Highness's words, it seemed that he wanted to explain something to that man. However, His Highness was of noble birth and was decisive in killing. Since when did he need to explain so much to others? Most importantly, that man was actually Her Highness' fiancé. 13 scratched his head. 7th brother and the others didn't mention it before. He grew up in Shilling City and was very sure that the man was definitely not from Shilling City. However, judging from the aura around him, he shouldn't be underestimated. 13 looked inside again and scratched his head. "This is what I wanted to tell you." In the room, Chu Liwei and Rong Xiu sat facing each other. Chu Liwei told him everything about her past life and current life. "I am Chu Liwei from the Empire of Yaoqin, and also from the Shanghai Yu of the Tianling dynasty." She looked at Rong Xiu and said word by word seriously. "Previously, I only said that there was an enemy of mine in Shilling City, but I didn't tell you everything clearly because, at that time, I wasn't sure if I could successfully complete what I wanted to do. But now, everything has been settled. I originally wanted to find an opportunity to tell you, but I didn't expect it to happen today." Chu Liwei took a deep breath. "Rong Xiu, this is the real me." After saying that, Chu Liwei fell silent and waited quietly for Rong Xiu's reaction. However, unexpectedly, Rong Xiu's face didn't show any shock or surprise. Instead, there was a hint of tenderness in his eyes. He reached out and held her hand tightly. His fingers gently rubbed the back of her hand a few times. "Does it hurt?" Chu Liwei was stunned. "What? Whether it was that day when you rejected me or everything that happened after that, my must have suffered a lot, right?" Rong Xiu looked at her, his eyes deep. He was waiting for her to tell him everything personally, but to her, it was undoubtedly exposing her own scars. Knowing that she had suffered a lot was also a kind of torture for him. Chu Liwei was stunned, but her eyes suddenly became hot. "Rong Xiu, you are not angry that I lied to you?" Although she didn't mean to deceive him, she had hidden too many things after all. Rong Xiu actually didn't care at all? Hearing that, Rong Xiu shook his head gently, smiled slightly, and sighed softly. I don't even have enough time to feel sorry for you. How can I have the energy to be angry? Chu Luiwei didn't expect Rong Xiu to have such a reaction. In the next moment, Rong Xiu leaned closer and sucked a teardrop from the corner of her eye. Promise me that in the future, don't shoulder anything by yourself. I'll always be there. The previous uneasiness and guilt all disappeared at this moment, and all of it turned into grievances and poured out in torrents. Suddenly, as if the heavy armor had been removed, her whole body relaxed. The suffering and torture that she had experienced in the past seemed to be not worth mentioning now. The heavens gave her pain and disaster, but they also gave her Rong Xiu. Chu Luiwei closed her eyes and buried her head in his shoulder, her voice muffled. After a while, there was a knock on the door outside. 13's somewhat nervous voice sounded. Your Highness? The rain has stopped for a long time. Should we go back to the palace? In fact, he didn't want to rush at this time, but there were still people waiting in the palace. Chu Liuyue's emotions gradually calmed down, and she pulled herself out of Rong Xiu's arms. She almost forgot that 13 was still waiting outside. I wanted to talk to you about something, but it seems that I can't today. Rong Xiu tidied her messy hair and gently rubbed her face. Chu Luiwei looked at him, and a white light suddenly flashed in her mind. She vaguely felt that Rong Xiu seemed to want to talk to her about something important. And it was very likely that it was because of his previous identity as this son of God. But 13 was already rushing her, and it was indeed not convenient for her to stay for too long. Chu Luiwei could only nod. Then you can stay here for the night. Tomorrow, she paused, raised her eyes slightly, and glanced at Rong Xiu again. Actually, father mentioned to me before that. He said that he wanted to see you. Rong Xiu understood and kissed her gently between her eyebrows. Then I'll visit father-in-law tomorrow. Chu Liuyue's face turned red, and then she was a little worried. Won't tomorrow be too soon? There should be some time to prepare for this kind of thing. Rong Xiu narrowed his eyes, and a smile flashed across his eyes. His wife didn't seem to have much confidence in her man. Then in 3 days. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 9:12. After saying goodbye to Rong Xiu, Chu Luiwei returned to the palace with Shan. She was disappointed and worried, but after seeing Rong Xiu, she inexplicably felt relieved. It seemed that with him there was nothing to worry about. When she returned to Zhaoyu Hall, Shang Guanyu had been waiting there for a long time. Seeing Chu Luiwei return safely, Shang Guanyu breathed a sigh of relief. Ever since the incident 2 years ago, he had become much more sensitive. Chu Luiwei had been away for too long, and he would be worried. Although he knew that she had a lot of trump cards now, it was normal for her parents to be worried. Chu Luiwei thought about it and only told Shang Guanyu that Rong Xiu would come in 3 days. As for Chu Ning being held hostage, she did not mention much. Now she did not even know who the other party was, and telling her father would only make him more worried. However, Shang Guanyu became more and more curious about Rong Xiu. He wondered what kind of person could be so favored by her. Looking at Chu Liuyue's sparkling eyes when she mentioned Rong Xiu, Shang Guanyu secretly made up his mind. As long as the boy was a good person, he would not object. Everything was for the sake of his daughter's happiness. After sending Shang Guanyu away, Chu Luiwei returned to the study and sat down on a chair. She had experienced too many things today, which made her a little confused. Countless intertwined images flashed through her mind. After a long while, she opened her eyes. Her eyes were calm and serene. Taizu! Chu Luiwei respectfully called out. A translucent phantom appeared in front of her. It was Taizu. Girl, what's bothering you? Taizu asked with one hand behind his back. Chu Luiwei nodded. The black demon cave you mentioned before, what kind of existence is it? Hearing this, Taizu looked solemn and was silent for a while. Chu Luiwei waited quietly. She had some understanding of the various dynasties in Heaven's Canopy. Some of them were stronger than the Tianling dynasty, while some were weaker. However, she had never heard of the Black Demon Cave. That's a hidden sect. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. Hidden sects. After a long while, Taizu spoke slowly. He let out a long sigh as if he was recalling something. 8,000 years ago, I was already at the peak of the 9th stage, just one step away from stepping into the deity realm. But even after 10 years, I still haven't succeeded. After that, I left Tianling and traveled the continent. Encountering the Black Demon Cave was actually a pure accident. The experts of the Black Demon Cave are as numerous as the clouds. Even when I was at my peak, I still couldn't be compared to them. I've seen the Black Demon Cave's people move mountains and fill seas. They're truly great experts. Even after 1,000 years, the things that happened back then were still deeply engraved in his mind, as fresh as yesterday. Chu Luiyue was also shocked. Taizu was the strongest expert of the Tianling dynasty in 1,000 years. If even he said so, then just how strong were the people of the Black Demon Cave? That day, although that person didn't have a physical body and was only left with a soul, the aura of the Black Demon Cave was extremely strong. That's why I recognized it at a glance. These hidden sects were very strong in cultivation, and most of them had their own distinctive characteristics. As long as you've seen them, you'll be able to recognize them at a glance. But these people are usually very arrogant and rarely enter the world, let alone participate in the disputes between dynasties. Taizu shook his head, looking puzzled. I don't know what's going on this time, Chu Luiyue pondered for a moment. That soul has been in Shangguanwan's body for a long time, at least a few years. According to what Shangguanwan said, she herself doesn't know when that person came into existence. But many of the things she did later were because she was bewitched by that person, including the matter of killing me. Taizu looked at her with a complicated gaze. Actually, that day, I've already sensed that that person seems to be targeting you. Do you know why? Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. She still remembered clearly what that person had said at that time. It seemed to be because of the water droplet in her body. Ever since this water droplet transformed into an existence similar to the pill of origin in her body, it had been in this form almost all the time. But that day, under the influence of that man, it transformed into the appearance of a transparent book page again, and faintly felt like it was struggling to be pulled out. But if that person came for this, then why did he target her so early on? Before she died in her previous life, she didn't have this thing on her. It was only after she had been reborn that such an item suddenly appeared in her body out of nowhere. Even now, she still didn't know what it was. She shook her head. That person's attack failed, but he definitely won't give up. He'll come again in the future. Taizu said in a low voice. It's fine if he's alone, but if he implicates others, this was actually what he was most worried about. If the people of Black Demon Cave wanted to attack Tianling, even he might not be able to defeat them. Girl, the most important thing for you now is to improve your cultivation as soon as possible. This way, even if someone wants to trouble you in the future, you'll have the power to deal with it. Taizu frowned. You have too many treasures on you, and any one of them will attract the covetous eyes of countless people. You can hide it for a while, but you can't hide it forever. The only way, and also the best way, was to become stronger by himself. Chu Luiyue nodded seriously. You will remember Taizu's teachings. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. Early in the morning, Chu Luiyue got up and packed up, then went to the Yuanhe Palace. The Yuanhe Palace was Shangguan Yu's bedchamber. It was obvious that Shangguan Yu wanted to meet Rong Xiu as Rong Xiu's father by setting the venue here instead of the palace hall where the other officials would attend court. Although Shangguan Yu was now the emperor, in Shangguan Yu's eyes, whether this marriage could make her happy was the most important thing. Perhaps in the eyes of the world, an emperor's marriage was a matter of state first, followed by family affairs. But in Shangguan Yu's eyes, it was a matter of family first, followed by state affairs. Everywhere she passed, the palace servants bowed respectfully. But just as she walked out of the Yuanhe Palace, she saw someone standing there, as if waiting for someone. Hearing the movement, the person turned around. When he saw Chu Luiyue's face, a trace of excitement and joy appeared on the handsome young man's face. He took 2 quick steps forward. Your Majesty. Chu Luiyue looked at him strangely. Zhao Zicheng? Why are you here? This was the second son of the Zhao family, also a famous family in Xiling City. But he had left Xiling a few years ago, and she didn't expect him to come back today. Hearing her question, Zhao Zicheng's ears turned red. When I heard that your Majesty had returned, I rushed back day and night, hoping to see your Majesty. He seemed to be very nervous, but his face was full of hope and sincerity. Your Majesty, I'm here today to confess my feelings to you. Previously, because you chose Jiang Yuqing, I didn't say much and left Xiling. But this time, please give Zicheng a chance. The corner of Chu Liyue's eyes twitched. Is he confessing? On the day when I'm going to meet father with my fiancée? Digression, I suddenly found out that a friend of mine had a tumor, so I chatted with him for a long time. Everyone, take care of your health and have regular checkups. Sigh, I'll continue at 6. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 9:13. Zhao Zicheng didn't seem to notice anything wrong with Chu Liyue's expression and continued speaking. Because I know that your Majesty has been busy recently, Zicheng has been staying in the residence these few days and didn't dare to disturb you. Zhao Zicheng looked up and quickly glanced at the woman in front of him. His eyes were filled with unconcealable adoration, and his nervous heart was beating wildly. But Zicheng has admired your Majesty for many years. I'm afraid that if I don't say it this time, I won't have another chance in the future. Zhao Zicheng instantly felt much better after finally speaking his mind. However, his handsome face was stained with a tinge of red. His eyes were filled with hope and uneasiness as he looked at Chu Luiyue as if he was waiting for her answer. Chu Luiyue sighed inwardly. To be honest, Zhao Zicheng was very good. Although the Zhao family wasn't considered the top family in Xiling City, they were still officials of the Tianling dynasty for hundreds of years and had a deep foundation. As the second son of the Zhao family's direct descendant, Zhao Zicheng's status was even more precious. Most importantly, he was an extremely outstanding mystic master genius. In the entire Xiling, except for Chu Luiyue, almost no one could be compared to him. If Jian Fengqi was a genius who was only one step behind her in alchemy, then Zhao Zicheng was above mystic master level and could fight with her. When she was young, she cultivated with many elders of the imperial family. Jian Fengqi and Zhao Zicheng had been her study companions for a period of time. Unlike Jian Fengqi's arrogant and unbridled personality, Zhao Zicheng was more like a modest gentleman with an introverted and gentle personality. For so many years, everyone in Xiling City praised the second son of the Zhao family when they mentioned him. Even compared to Jiang Yuqing, he was definitely on par in all aspects. Zhao Zicheng, I remember that you are already 27 this year. Chu Liyue said. Zhao Zicheng was stunned for a moment and nodded in confusion. That's right. At this age, you should have married and had children long ago. Chu Liyue said sincerely and calmly. You don't have to waste any more time on me. Zhao Zicheng's originally slightly red face turned white with a swish. A hint of panic flashed in his eyes. Your Majesty, what do you mean? Chu Liyue shook his head. As smart as you are, there's no way you don't know what I mean. If that's the case, don't mention it again in the future. Please leave. With that, Chu Liyue prepared to leave. Zhao Zicheng only hesitated for a moment before he immediately blocked her way again. Your Majesty, Zicheng is sincerely seeking your hand in marriage. Zhao Zicheng tried hard to suppress the nervousness and embarrassment in his heart. Back then, because Jiang Yuqing beat me to it and you agreed to the engagement with him, I put away my thoughts and left the West Hill alone. Although it's uncomfortable, as long as you're happy, everything else doesn't matter. But now, he has betrayed you, and I am filled with regret. Missing it once is already a matter of life and death. I don't want the same thing to happen a second time. Zhao Zicheng was determined to come today. A few years ago, he left heartbroken, thinking that he had helped her, but he didn't expect that in the end, everything would be so absurd. When he heard that she had survived a great disaster and returned from a tribulation, he immediately rushed back. No matter what, he would definitely persevere to the end this time. Although he himself didn't care much about worldly possessions in terms of background, talent, and so on, he was confident that he was definitely one of the most suitable choices for her now. Chu Luiwei felt a headache coming on. Zhao Zicheng had a cool and gentle personality, but when this kind of person was stubborn, even a few oxen couldn't pull him back. Zhao Zicheng, I have always understood your feelings. Chu Luiwei thought about it, but still decided to tell him the truth. Since many years ago, even if you don't say it, I understand. Zhao Zicheng was actually a very honest person and didn't know how to hide his feelings. She wasn't stupid. They had spent a few years studying together, and later he entered the imperial court as an official. From time to time, they would see each other in the imperial court or at palace banquets. How could she not know his feelings? It was just that things like feelings could never be forced. Zhao Zicheng was stunned for a moment, and it took him a while to realize what she meant. Looking at the clear eyes of the woman in front of him, he felt a sharp pain in his heart. Although her appearance was slightly different from before, her eyebrows and eyes were still the familiar appearance in his memory. She was still her. These words were a clear rejection. But, he didn't want to give up just like that. Can't you give me a chance? Zhao Zicheng spoke with difficulty, as if something in his eyes would shatter at the slightest touch. It wasn't that he hadn't thought of forgetting and letting go of this person after so many years of thinking. If he could do it, he wouldn't be standing here today. Just one time and, no. A low and cold man's voice suddenly came from behind. Although the tone was light, there was a faint sharp pressure in the words. Zhao Zicheng turned around and saw a man in white. He didn't know when, but he had appeared not far behind him. The man looked to be in his early 20s. He was tall and wore a white robe. The breeze blew the corner of his robe, making him look like a banished immortal. But what was even more shocking was his appearance. His facial features were as if they were carefully carved and cast by the heavens. There wasn't a single spot that wasn't perfect. He was noble and unparalleled, but there was also a trace of demonic aura. Just by standing there, he could easily take away all the colors between heaven and earth. Even Zhao Zicheng had to admit that this person's appearance and aura was really something he had never seen before in his life. You are. Rong Xiu's thin scarlet lips curled into a faint smile. I am Yu's fiancé, Rong Xiu. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 9:14. It was a simple sentence, but it was like a sudden clap of thunder. It smashed into Zhao Zicheng's heart. His mind went blank for a moment. What did you say? He was her fiancé. Didn't she just come back? When he looked back in shock, only to see the woman who had been distant and cold to him just now unconsciously smile after seeing the person who came. Thousands of stars seemed to shine in her eyes. At this moment, Zhao Zicheng's heart turned cold. Rong Xiu. Chu Luiwei didn't expect him to come so quickly and walked over. Why are you here so early? Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly and smiled faintly. Since I want to meet my father-in-law, I naturally have to be early. Besides, if I came late, wouldn't I miss a good show? Chu Luiwei glared at him. How could he joke with her at this time? She had clearly rejected him just now. Rong Xiu looked at her angry and coquettish expression and smiled slightly. His heart itched slightly and he wanted to hug her directly. But when he thought that this was the Tianling Palace and there were many palace servants around to serve them, he suppressed the urge and just held her hand. Seeing the two of them clasped hands, Zhao Zicheng finally reacted. He frowned subconsciously. Anyone could see that the two of them were very close. Fiancé, why hadn't he heard of it before? Zhao Zicheng had specially asked his father a few days ago to sound out Sheng Guanyu, but he didn't mention it at that time. Could it be someone she met in the past 2 years? If he remembered correctly, she had returned from an empire called Yaochen outside Heaven's Canopy. This man, you don't seem to be from West Hill. Zhao Zicheng took a deep breath and tried to make himself look calm. Not to mention West Hill, even in the entire Tianling, there was no Rong family among the famous families. There was a high probability that it was from Yaochen. Chu Luiyue didn't want to say too much to Zhao Zicheng, so she said, "Father should be waiting for me. Father should be waiting inside, so I'll go in with Rong Xiu first. Second young master Zhao, you should go back too." Zhao Zicheng looked at Rong Xiu insistently. "Since you're Her Majesty's fiancé, there's nothing you can't say about your family background, right?" He was going to go against Rong Xiu. Rong Xiu looked at Chu Luiyue comfortingly and smiled. "I'm 7th Prince Yao Chen Rong Xiu." He was indeed from of Yao Chen's people. Of course. Of the ROF of course. Of the Tianling of the Tianling of the Emperor of the Emperors of the difference in status between the two of them was too great. Not to mention him, even the officials of the imperial court wouldn't agree to this marriage. Zhao Zicheng couldn't help but look at Chu Luiyue. Of course she knew this, but she was still so insistent. It was enough to prove that she was truly moved by this man. Zhao Zicheng clenched his fists tightly, feeling extremely conflicted. In the early years, it was Jiang Yuqing who was one step ahead. Now there was Rong Xiu. It seemed that he was always a little short of success every time. He really couldn't take it lying down. "I am the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel, Zhao Zicheng." Although Zhao Zicheng hadn't stayed in West Hill for the past few years, he hadn't resigned from his position. His journey had been smooth, and he had already become an assistant minister at such a young age. But in fact, this title was not worth mentioning compared to his aristocratic background. There were several assistant ministers of the Ministry of Rights, but there was only one second young master of the Zhao family. Zhao Zicheng had no intention of using his background to suppress others. He only wanted to use his official position to try and pressure the other party. When ordinary people heard this, it was inevitable that they would be surprised and in admiration. But after he finished speaking, the man opposite him only nodded with an indifferent expression, as if he didn't care. "Second young master Zhao, I've heard of you." Chu Luiyue and Zhao Zicheng both looked at him in surprise. Chu Luiyue thought that Rong Xiu had only been to West Hill once before, and Zhao Zicheng wasn't here at that time. How could he have heard of Zhao Zicheng's name? Zhao Zicheng thought to himself, "Judging from this Rong Xiu's tone, he seems to know something about me, but why doesn't he care at all? Perhaps he doesn't know much about the situation in West Hill? If that's the case, it would explain his series of reactions." Zhao Zicheng took a deep breath. "I have a few words that I would like to talk to young Master Rong alone. Is it convenient for you?" Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows and nodded. "Why not?" Seeing that the atmosphere was getting strange, Chu Luiyue grabbed Rong Xiu. "If you have something to say, say it here. It's most likely related to me. Why can't I listen?" Zhao Zicheng looked at her hesitantly. "Your Majesty, Rong Xiu and I are engaged. What can I not listen to? Second young Master Zhao, if you have something to say, please speak your mind." Rong Xiu blinked, and a faint smile flashed across his eyes. "Well, it's rare to see her supporting me like this. It feels good?" Zhao Zicheng's eyes dimmed for a moment. "Even Jiang Yuqing back then, she didn't seem to have spoken up for me like this. She's protecting me like this. It's obvious that she's really in love." On the other hand, Rong Xiu was standing behind her, as if he was enjoying this woman's protection of him with a clear conscience. Zhao Zicheng suddenly became angry. "If it's already like this, won't it be worse in the future? This marriage is not worth it to me." Zhao Zicheng's expression became much more serious. "Since your Majesty has said so, I will not mince my words. Young Master Rong, if you are sincere to Her Majesty, then please leave her now and don't have anything to do with her anymore." As soon as he finished speaking, the atmosphere suddenly turned cold. The space around them seemed to freeze inch by inch. Chu Luiyue could clearly feel an extremely cold aura spreading from Rong Xiu's body. For a moment, Zhao Zicheng felt an extremely dangerous killing intent. His heart suddenly skipped a beat. His hair stood on end. But in the blink of an eye, this feeling quickly disappeared without a trace. It was as if everything was just an illusion. Rong Xiu smiled, but his voice was so cold that it made one's heart tremble. "What if I say no?" Zhao Zicheng knew that he would definitely not agree after hearing this, so he wasn't discouraged and continued speaking. Perhaps you two were very close in the past, but now, as you can see, she is already the Tianling Emperor. She needs to marry someone of the same status, but you don't have this right. If you really like her and cherish her, then for her own good, you should cancel this marriage and leave. Don't tell me you don't know what self-awareness is. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 9:15. Chu Liuyue's expression turned cold. Zhao Zicheng, Rong Xiu held her hand and gave her a reassuring glance. Then he chuckled as if he didn't care about Zhao Zicheng's words and didn't show any anger at being provoked. If I can prove that I'm worthy of you, second young Master Zhao will take back your words and promise not to disturb you in the future. How about it? Zhao Zicheng didn't expect Rong Xiu to not only not be angry, but also take the initiative to say such a thing. He couldn't help but frown and ask in return, "Prove? What proof do you have?" Rong Xiu's expression was indifferent. He stood there, as ethereal and cold as a landscape painting, exuding an indescribable charm. "Whatever you can think of, just do it." His voice was light and nonchalant, as if he didn't take this matter to heart at all. This was the kind of confidence that could only come from a person with great strength. Zhao Zicheng's first reaction was that it was absurd. This Rong Xiu truly didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. He even dared to say such a thing. Did he know what kind of existence the Tianling dynasty was? Any one of the people here might be able to easily crush him. This made Zhao Zicheng even more dissatisfied and indignant. Such an arrogant and domineering man didn't deserve to be with her. Even if she didn't like him, Zhao Zicheng, and chose other outstanding young talents, he had nothing to say. But this Rong Xiu couldn't do it. Zhao Zicheng clenched his fists and said, "All right, since you dare to face it head-on, this young master won't deliberately make things difficult for you. One's background can't be chosen, so there's no need to compare. As long as you can prove that you're outstanding enough. May I ask, young Master Rong, what kind of cultivation do you practice? Martial artist, mystic master, or celestial physician?" Rong Xiu raised his brows slightly. "May I know which one second young Master Zhao is best at?" Zhao Zicheng froze for a moment, then straightened his body and said with a slightly solemn expression, "Mystic master." He actually dabbled in the other two fields, but comparatively speaking, his talent as a mystic master was the best. His cultivation as a mystic master was also the highest. "Then I'll be a mystic cultivator," Rong Xiu said indifferently. There was a moment of silence. After a moment, Zhao Zicheng opened his eyes slightly and asked in surprise and shock, "Mystic cultivator? Are you sure?" He had already said that he was best at being a Xian master, but Rong Xiu just had to choose this, "I'm sure." Of course, if second young Master Zhao wanted to compete in other aspects, Rong Xiu would naturally accompany him to the end. Rong Xiu's expression was calm and there was a hint of a smile on his lips. He seemed to be very patient. His reaction completely provoked Zhao Zicheng. "Good. That was a Xian master. If you can defeat me from now on, I will never get involved in these matters again. Also, from now on, stay away from you." Rong Xiu reminded. Zhao Zicheng choked. "All right." Hearing the answer, Rong Xiu nodded with satisfaction. Chu Luiyue glanced at Rong Xiu. "This is on purpose? Why do I feel that Rong Xiu deliberately induced Zhao Zicheng to say these words?" Zhao Zicheng composed himself. "In that case, let's make an appointment. Let's do it today." Before he finished speaking, a low and powerful voice came from not far away. They looked back and saw that Shang Guanyu had already walked out of Yuanhe Hall. The words just now came from his mouth. "Father!" Chu Luiyue shouted. Rong Xiu cupped his fists and bowed to Shang Guanyu. "Rong Xiu greets your majesty." Zhao Zicheng didn't expect Shang Guanyu to appear at this time. Thinking that he seemed to have heard everything just now, he was a little nervous and also bowed. Shock flashed across Shang Guanyu's eyes as he sized Rong Xiu up, but there was also a tinge of admiration. He waited in Yuanhe Hall for a long time, but no one came. Later, he heard from the palace servants that a few people were quarreling outside, so he planned to come out and take a look. At first glance, he saw his baby Yu. Then, he turned his gaze and saw another man in white standing beside her. Seeing that the two were standing very close to each other, he had already guessed the identity of this person. Although he only saw the back of Rong Xiu just now, Shangguanyu could still vaguely sense the noble and imposing aura of Rong Xiu. He was a little surprised. Even the ordinary children of the aristocratic families couldn't compare to such an imposing manner. He had been sitting on the throne for a long time, so he had an excellent eye for people. Rong Xiu exuded a noble aura that only a person of high status would have. He had seen Emperor Yaochen a few times, but he couldn't be compared to this person. He didn't seem like someone who could be raised by an existence like Emperor Yaochen, so your Rong Xiu, standing close to him and sizing him up, Shangguanyu finally saw Rong Xiu's face clearly. He couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Isn't he too good-looking? Even he had to admit that he'd never seen such a peerlessly noble appearance that was like an immortal's in his life. Even Jiang Yuqing, who was famous for being the most handsome man in Xiling, paled in comparison to her instantly. In comparison, it was like a firefly competing with the sun and the moon. The contrast was simply tragic. With just one look, Shangguanyu immediately understood why his daughter liked him. With such a face, he was probably a young girl who was in love. Her heart would be moved at the sight of him. If he hadn't eavesdropped for a while just now and felt that this man was quite responsible and courageous, Shangguanyu almost suspected that his baby daughter was simply bewitched by this devilish face. Father, Rong Xiu and I were going to visit you, but we didn't expect to meet second young Master Zhao. We were delayed for a while. You won't be angry, right? Chu Luiyue blinked. Shangguanyu laughed. He knew that she was speaking up for Rong Xiu, but he felt inexplicably unhappy when he saw how protective she was of Rong Xiu. Do you think your father is such a petty person? Zhao Zicheng's heart skipped a beat when he heard that. So they had made an appointment long ago? Then wouldn't he? Thinking of this, Zhao Zicheng suddenly felt even more nervous. Shangguanyu looked at Zhao Zicheng and sighed in his heart. Although Zhao Zicheng was outstanding in all aspects, what could he do if you didn't like him? Back then, Zhao Zicheng left West Hill sadly because of the engagement between you and Jiang Yuqing. In fact, it wasn't that he didn't know. Now that Jiang Yuqing was defeated and imprisoned, Zhao Zicheng still had feelings for you, and specially came to ask for her hand in marriage. There was nothing wrong with that. Unfortunately, he was still a step too late. Since you have made an appointment, there's no time like the present. Let's do it today. He also wanted to see how powerful Rong Xiu was. Yu had praised him before, but he still didn't quite believe it. Only when he saw it with his own eyes could he be sure. Coincidentally, there's a martial arts field behind Yuanhe Hall. Let's do it there. Since Shangguanyu had said so, the rest of the people naturally wouldn't object. Everyone began to walk into Yuanhe Hall. Chu Luiyue pulled Rong Xiu's sleeve and whispered, Rong Xiu, when did you cultivate as a Xian master? Zhao Zicheng is very talented in this aspect. Can you do it? Mobile users, please browse for a more high-quality reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 9:16. When Rong Xiu heard this, his footsteps paused slightly. He glanced at her and raised his eyebrows slightly. A faint light flashed across his deep phoenix eyes. For some reason, Chu Luiyue suddenly felt a chill run down her spine. It was extremely dangerous. He didn't open his mouth, but a voice as weak as a fly clearly entered her ears. Don't say such things in the future. Chu Luiyue blinked and vaguely felt that she had committed a huge taboo. What did I just say? Put your heart back in your stomach. Rong Xiu gave his wife a warning look. Your man is very good at everything. Chu Luiyue's face heated up slightly, and her ears burned a little. She immediately looked away and followed the crowd forward. TSK, wasn't she also worried about him? After all, they had known each other for so long, but she still didn't know that Rong Xiu was actually a mystic cultivator. Although she knew that Rong Xiu was very strong in the past, she had always thought that he was only a martial artist. Now that she was going to compete with Zhao Zicheng as a mystic cultivator, she really didn't have any confidence. Zhao Zicheng's talent in this aspect was only slightly weaker than hers. After so many years of diligent cultivation, it wasn't hard to imagine how powerful his cultivation had become as a mystic cultivator. Rong Xiu was actually so calm. However, a certain someone who had been warned by Yanjing naturally didn't dare to ask any more questions. Since he had such a reaction, he should have some confidence. Seeing Rong Xiu's calm and confident appearance as if he didn't take this matter seriously, Chu Luiyue, who was originally a little worried, gradually relaxed. This man seemed to have never needed her to worry about. Yuanhe Hall, martial arts training field in the backyard. Rong Xiu and Zhao Zicheng stood facing each other. Shangguan Yu and Chu Luiyue sat below the field. Around them stood the black cavalry who were in charge of guarding. It was quiet all around. Everyone's gaze was focused on the two people on the field. Some were curious, while others were doubtful. Now, everyone here already knew that the man in white, Rong Xiu, was Her Majesty's fiancé. Since Zhao Zicheng failed to marry Her Majesty, the two of them decided to compete. Since this matter involved Chu Luiyue, it would naturally cause a huge commotion. At this moment, although everyone looked very calm on the surface, their hearts were already surging with waves. Outside the palace gates in the distance, some palace servants were huddled together, cautiously looking in this direction. I heard that the man in white was Her Majesty's fiancé in country Yaochen. I think he's the 7th prince of country Yaochen. Yaochen? Isn't that a vassal state of Tianling? Even though he is a prince, his status doesn't match His Majesty's. But such a graceful appearance is truly rare in the world. Previously, I thought that second young Master Zhao was quite good. However, I don't know why, but when I compare the two of them, I actually feel that second young Master Zhao is slightly inferior. These are all external things, they're not that important. Her Majesty's status is noble. Even if she agrees, I'm afraid the courtiers won't nod their heads easily. When second young Master Zhao left Xiling, he was already a level 7 mystic master. After a few years, I wonder how much he has improved. I'm afraid this duel is going to be difficult. Zhao Zicheng looked at Rong Xiu opposite him and cupped his fists. Please. Rong Xiu nodded indifferently. Seeing how calm he was, Zhao Zicheng frowned. I'll let him be arrogant for a while longer. When we really fight, he'll know what it means to say that there's always someone better than you. There are some people that a mere 7th prince of Yaochen can't obtain. Zhao Zicheng held his breath and focused. He slightly staggered his feet and raised his hand. A silver force as thick as a thumb instantly flew out from his palm. That force was extremely pure. It danced lightly in the wind, but it contained a powerful pressure. Then, Zhao Zicheng waved his hands. That force actually split into hundreds of forces in an instant. Moreover, each of them was the same thickness as the first one. The aura of each force was completely the same. To be able to gather these forces together and quickly split them up again, it was enough to prove that Zhao Zicheng's control of the force was already at the peak of perfection. Countless silver lines circled around his hands. They were like swimming fishes, swift and agile. Then, these lines began to intertwine and overlap, quickly forming a huge circular Xian formation. As the pattern on the Xian formation became more and more complex, Zhao Zicheng's aura also rose rapidly. In just a few breaths of time, the silver Xian formation was already so complicated that it was dazzling. Buzz. A heavy pressure spread out from the Xian formation. As it slowly rotated, the void at the edge of it was actually silently cut open by black spatial cracks. From this, it could be seen how terrifying the power of the Xian formation was. Shangguan Yu was very surprised. He sat up slightly and stared at the Xian formation. I really didn't expect. Zhao Zicheng has already broken through to become a level 8 mystic master. With such pressure, he was definitely a level 8 mystic master. It could be seen that he had not slacked off in the past few years and had been cultivating with all his might. Calculating his age, he was not even 30 years old this year. Even in the entire Tianling dynasty, there were very few people who could break through to level 8 mystic master at this time. After saying that, Shang Guanyu turned his gaze and looked at Rong Xiu opposite him. He was slightly stunned. Rong Xiu stood tall and slender with one hand behind his back, looking calm and composed. He actually hasn't moved yet? When Zhao Zicheng had already started and even the high-level Xian formation was about to be completed, Rong Xiu actually didn't react at all? Is he planning to give up directly? But even if his strength is not as good as Zhao Zicheng's, he should at least try his best, right? What does he mean by standing still like this? Shang Guanyu couldn't help but frown. Chu Luiyue looked at this scene and felt very strange, but more than that, she was curious. To be honest, until now, she still didn't know what level Rong Xiu's strength was at. Moreover, today was a Mystic Master competition. She really wanted to see how strong Rong Xiu was in this aspect. Zhao Zicheng took in all of Rong Xiu's reactions. His mood, which was already bad, instantly became even worse. This scene looked like he was going all out, but Rong Xiu didn't care about it at all. Zhao Zicheng pursed his lips and injected another stream of force into the Xian formation. A huge figure appeared on the Xian formation. At first glance, it looked like a tiger. Startling tiger formation. Roar. Following this earth-shattering roar, the ferocious tiger suddenly leaped out and went straight for Rong Xiu. In the next moment, a white figure suddenly appeared in front of Rong Xiu. It was clearly a white lion. Its icy blue eyes stared coldly at the ferocious tiger phantom as it raised its paw indifferently. Swoosh! The white light was like a blade, and in an instant, it tore the incomparably ferocious phantom into pieces. Rong Xiu looked up, and his thin lips curved up as he smiled. This won't do. Let's change it to someone I can fight. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 9:17. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. Before the crowd could realize what had happened, they saw the white tiger illusion, which had an imposing aura, dissipate in an instant. At this moment, even the Xian formation started to crack. The originally complicated and powerful Xian formation was instantly covered with spiderweb-like cracks. Zhao Zicheng's heart sank as he quickly retreated. The moment he left his original spot, the huge silver Xian formation shattered instantly. Boom! With a loud bang, the Xian formation turned into countless dazzling rays of light that scattered in all directions. The terrifying impact wreaked havoc in all directions. Zhao Zicheng only felt a tightness in his chest, and the pressure on his shoulders was as heavy as 2 mountains. But at this moment he no longer had the mood to care about this. He only looked at the Rong Xiu in horror. How could this be? How could this be? The Rong Xiu didn't even make a move. He only sent out a magical beast and easily destroyed the Xian formation that he had painstakingly set up. And the Rong Xiu's words made him even more embarrassed. His face was red and white, and the blood in his chest was surging. He originally thought that he could easily finish off the other party with one move, but he didn't expect that he would be the one at a disadvantage in the end. He was shocked and anxious, and couldn't help but look at the white lion in front of the Rong Xiu. Its body was snow white, and only its eyes were ice blue. Its entire body carried a dense chill. Just by standing there quietly, the ground beneath it was already covered with a layer of frost. This is your contracted magical beast? Zhao Zicheng asked in disbelief. From the attack just now, this white lion's rank was at least 8th grade, or even higher. It wasn't that Zhao Zicheng had never seen a higher rank magical beast. After all, Chu Luiyue's 9-colored heavenly pheasant was 9th grade. And in the next few years, when he was traveling outside, he was lucky enough to see it once or twice. He didn't know if it was his illusion, but the pressure and aura around this white lion seemed to be even stronger than the 9th grade magical beasts he had seen before. Just as this absurd and terrifying thought appeared, Zhao Zicheng immediately extinguished it. Impossible. Any contract between a magical beast and a human had to be based on the conditions. Generally speaking, only when a cultivator was powerful enough would he be able to make a contract with a magical beast willingly. If this white lion was really that Rong Xiu's strength, Zhao Zicheng closed his eyes tightly, trying to get rid of these distracting thoughts. but his back was still drenched in cold sweat. Rong Xiu was probably much stronger than he had expected. Chu Luiwei was originally watching leisurely from the side. When he saw Xue Xue come out, he raised his eyebrows slightly. Judging from Xue Xue's attack just now, its strength was almost on par with a 9th-grade magical beast. She remembered that when they first met, Xue Xue was indeed a high-level magical beast, but it was only around the 7th rank. How did it suddenly become so much stronger? One had to know that the grade of a magical beast was determined from birth. Only a very small number of magical beasts could increase their grade through continuous breakthroughs. And all of those magical beasts were existences with extremely powerful bloodlines. Moreover, even if Xue Xue originally had this potential, it seemed a little impossible for it to break through to this realm in such a short time. Chu Luiwei touched his chin and narrowed his eyes. Could it be that Xue Xue had deliberately hidden its strength in the past? Or it actually hadn't shown its true realm yet? At this moment, Rong Xiu chuckled and nodded. That's right. On this point, I think I should be worthy of you. Dead silence. Everyone present looked at Rong Xiu in shock and speechlessness. What did he mean by that? Now, in the entire Tianling, who didn't know that Chu Luiwei had returned from the death tribulation and ascended to the throne? And a divine beast was following by her side, the red-tailed red phoenix. Didn't Rong Xiu mean that his contracted magical beast was also a divine beast? This time, Shangguan Yu finally couldn't hold back and looked at Chu Luiwei. He actually contracted a divine beast? Why didn't you say before? Just this point alone was enough to earn him a lot of points. After all, in the entire Tianling dynasty, only Chu Luiwei had a divine beast. Chu Luiwei was speechless. She didn't know either. At this time, Shangguan Yu was still looking at the field, so he didn't notice Chu Luiwei's expression and stroked his beard. When did a prince from the empire of Yaochen become so powerful? No wonder he's so confident. Chu Luiwei was speechless. Actually, she wanted to ask more. In an instant, countless images appeared in her mind. She used to think that Xue Xue was smart and cute, but she never thought that it was actually a divine beast. The key was that in her knowledge, there didn't seem to be a divine beast that looked like a white lion. Rong Xiu had never told her this. Suddenly, her heart skipped a beat. Even Xue Xue's identity and strength were so shocking. What about Rong Xiu? Zhao Zicheng never expected that Rong Xiu would casually summon a divine beast. Looking at the white lion, his face was still full of disbelief. A divine beast? What kind of person could make a contract with it? Didn't they say that Rong Xiu came from an ordinary background? Where did this divine beast come from? Zhao Zicheng faintly felt uneasy, but at this time, the bet had been set and the two sides had already started fighting. It was absolutely impossible to stop. He forced himself to calm down, adjust his breath, and began to reconstruct the Xian formation. Previously, he thought that he could win easily, so he didn't use his full strength in the first move. But now, they had to be prepared for battle. Just as Zhao Zicheng began to construct the second Xian formation, a few figures suddenly rushed from the sky outside the palace gate. Your Majesty! Chu Luiwei and Shangguan Yu turned their heads at the same time and saw Elder Chen Ku and a few others coming together. Elder Chen Ku was the first to land. He quickly ran to Chu Luiwei and Shangguan Yu and asked nervously, Your Majesty, what happened here? Why was there such a big commotion just now? A few days ago, a big event had just happened in the palace, and their minds were still in a highly sensitive period. Therefore, when they heard the commotion just now, they immediately rushed over, thinking that it was another fight. After asking, Elder Chen Ku and a few others quickly looked around, but found that there was nothing wrong here. On the training field next to them, there were two people confronting each other. Nothing, it's just these two guys fighting. Shangguan Yu waved his hand, indicating that they didn't need to be nervous. Elder Chen Ku and a few others heaved a sigh of relief. But when they saw the faces of the two people, they were shocked again. What's going on? One of them was Zhao Zicheng. Judging from his breath, the commotion just now was caused by him. And the man in white opposite him, a few people wanted to ask, But they felt that the atmosphere was not right, so they all kept quiet and looked at the field. At this time, Zhao Zicheng's second Xian formation was completed. The pressure on it was obviously much stronger than before. He took a deep breath and used all his strength to send out the Xian formation. 1 Yang formation. Digression, 6 o'clock. Then he just found that a few chapters were blocked. I'll change the text. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 9:18. Above the Xian formation, rays of light gathered and slowly rose like a sun. Blinding light shot out from above, making it hard for people to open their eyes. The temperature of the surrounding space suddenly rose. Almost everyone who was standing nearby could feel the burning pain. Elder Chen Ke looked solemn. With a wave of his sleeve, he immediately set up a barrier around the martial arts field. Are the two of them really going to destroy this place completely? He muttered softly with a trace of shock in his eyes. Although the martial arts field in Yuanhe Hall was meticulously built and had a strong endurance, Zhao Zicheng was already a level 8 Xian master. Now that he executed this attack with all his strength, it naturally couldn't be underestimated. There was also the man in white beside him and the white lion beside him. Although he didn't know the identity of this person, judging from the fact that he could easily deal with Zhao Zicheng's Xian formation, he was also extremely powerful. If the two of them really fought, it would really be, Sheng Guanyu snorted when he heard that. Now that it was related to you, how could the two of them hold back? However, at first, he was worried that Rong Xiu wasn't Zhao Zicheng's match and that Yu would be embarrassed if he lost. But now, he felt that he was worrying too much. This Rong Xiu was able to contract with a divine beast, so he might have some other trump cards. But how could the 7th prince of country Yao Chen be so capable? Due to the impact of the Xian formation, there were already charred marks on the ground. It wasn't hard to imagine how terrifying it would be if all the energy on the ground were to hit one person. The force in Zhao Zicheng's body surged wildly, and his face was slightly pale. This Xian formation was a level 8 Xian formation, and it was also the highest level Xian formation that he could execute. In order to study the Xian formation thoroughly, he had spent a total of 3 years. Normally, even when he was fighting with others, he rarely used this move. Because with his current strength, executing this move would consume a lot of his energy. After using this move, regardless of the outcome, he basically wouldn't have the strength to continue fighting. In other words, he could only win if this move won. He drew the last stroke of the Xian formation with difficulty and immediately pushed it forward. Go! A profound formation that was as dazzling as the sun quickly crushed towards Rong Xiu. Everywhere it passed, the ground was scorched black, and even the air seemed to be burning. The distance between the two of them wasn't far to begin with, and Zhao Zicheng had used all his strength in this attack, so in the blink of an eye, the Xian formation had already rushed to a distance of 5 steps away from Rong Xiu. The berserk energy wreaked havoc and intertwined above the profound formation, and it even stirred up a gale. The corners of Rong Xiu's clothes fluttered in the wind. As they fluttered, faint golden patterns could be vaguely seen, like the sparkling ripples on a clear lake in a starry night. At this moment he finally moved. He raised his right hand and drew a line in the air with his slender fingers. A streak of silver light instantly appeared in front of him. Then his finger moved slightly and drew another line vertically. Just like that, the two silver origin powers intertwined to form a cross in front of him. This cross was only slightly bigger than a person's palm. Compared to Zhao Zicheng's Xian formation, it was so small that it wasn't even worth mentioning. Zhao Zicheng stared at him. Isn't it a little too late for you to start building a Xian formation now? In the end, he was too careless. Rong Xiu looked up slightly, and his thin lips curled into a smile. I'm already done. Zhao Zicheng was stunned. What? Already done? Just because of this little cross? What kind of Xian formation was this? Even a level 1 Xian master wouldn't be able to draw 2 lines so easily and call it a Xian formation. It could be seen that this Rong Xiu really didn't know anything about Xian masters. Since that was the case, Why did he have to choose a Xian master level to fight with him? Could it be that he just wanted to vent his anger because he was unconvinced? But what was the use of losing like this? Zhao Zicheng couldn't help but feel annoyed. A man with such mediocre strength and character didn't deserve to stand by her side. If you want to prove your strength, there are plenty of ways. Why do you have to do this? Before Zhao Zicheng could finish speaking, he saw Rong Xiu turn his wrist and push out the cross. From afar, it looked like a silver butterfly that was about to take flight. That butterfly flew past lightly and quickly arrived in front of the huge Xian formation. Then it directly passed through it. A faint sound was heard. Zhao Zicheng's voice stopped abruptly. He looked at the scene in front of him in shock and almost suspected that he had seen wrongly. That little cross, did it directly penetrate his profound formation? One had to know that the One-Yang formation contained an extremely abundant amount of force and couldn't be broken so easily. Furthermore, that thing, right at this moment, that terrifying Xian formation suddenly stopped 3 steps away from Rong Xiu. In the next moment, the light on the Xian formation quickly dimmed and was covered by a thick layer of ice. Zhao Zicheng suddenly felt a strong sense of uneasiness. No, crack. The crisp sound of something shattering resounded in the field. After that, the Xian formation shattered into countless pieces. It suddenly dissipated. Zhao Zicheng was severely injured and his body shook violently. He spat out a mouthful of blood and staggered a step back, almost falling down. The aura around him quickly withered and his entire body seemed to have been drained of all his strength and spirit. Only that pair of eyes that were filled with shock and horror showed his current mood. He opened his mouth with difficulty and could only smell the stench of rust in his mouth. He wasn't the only one. Everyone at the scene was astonished. Just now, Rong Xiu actually used that small cross Xian formation to defeat Zhao Zicheng? Swoosh. That cross circled half a circle in the air and flew back. Rong Xiu raised his hand and easily caught it with his slender fingers. The whole process was as simple as throwing out a dart. There was dead silence. Rong Xiu seemed to be unaware of the surrounding people's reactions and looked at Zhao Zicheng. Do you admit defeat? His tone was light and his expression was calm. Looking at that pair of deep and cold phoenix eyes, it seemed to hide countless unfathomable stormy waves. Zhao Zicheng's heart trembled violently. At this moment, he finally confirmed that Rong Xiu was indeed far stronger than him. Others might not know, but just now, when his Xian formation broke, he clearly felt an unparalleled pressure spreading out from that cross Xian formation. That was indeed a Xian formation. If he guessed correctly, there was an even higher level Xian formation hidden within those 2 streams of light. However, Rong Xiu did not open it. But it was enough to deal with him. Zhao Zicheng closed his eyes. I admit defeat. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 9:19. Zhao Zicheng actually admitted defeat just like that. The moment he said that, everyone had a complicated expression on their faces. Actually, they could already foresee this outcome when they saw the previous scene. Zhao Zicheng clearly didn't have the strength to continue fighting, and he had no chance of winning if this dragged on. He was severely injured, but Rong Xiu didn't even move a single step from the beginning to the end. Looking at the entire scene, he merely raised his hand and casually swiped twice. What was the point of continuing the fight? It was only right for him to admit defeat now. Who would have expected such an outcome 15 minutes ago? Zhao Zicheng was a level 8 Xian master. Elder Chen Ku, did you see it clearly just now? Was that a Xian formation or not? A few elders from the royal family couldn't help but ask softly. Elder Chen Ku frowned and took a deep breath. That was indeed a Xian formation. Hearing this, the elders looked at each other in dismay. But how can a Xian formation be like that? It's just 2 forces intertwined. How can it break a level 8 Xian formation so easily? Elder Chen Ku stared at Rong Xiu in the arena and didn't explain further. But why else could it be? Naturally, it was because the cross-Xian formation executed by Rong Xiu was stronger than Zhao Zicheng's. Generally speaking, the higher the level of a Xian master, the better their control over their force. Under such circumstances, the more complicated the Xian formation was, the stronger its power. This was also why everyone was puzzled by Rong Xiu's victory. In the eyes of ordinary people, that thing of his might not even be considered a Xian formation. But it clearly contained a power that was stronger than a level 8 Xian formation, and it easily destroyed it. Elder Chen faintly recalled that there was once a rumor that a top-notch Xian master could turn complex Xian formations into extremely simple diagrams, and they could also possess terrifying power. Could it be? Rong Xiu was like that? But those who could reach such a level were all. Where exactly did this Rong Xiu come from? Elder Chen couldn't help but ask. He is the 7th prince of country Yaochen and also Yu Er's fiancé. Shengguan Yu also came back to his senses at this time. Hearing Elder Chen's question in a low voice, he answered solemnly. The elders were all taken aback. Yaochen? Isn't that the place where Chu Luiwei came back? It seemed to be just a vassal country of Tianling. How could there be such a strong person? Shengguan Yu let out a long sigh, but the waves in his heart still hadn't calmed down. He looked at Rong Xiu with admiration in his eyes. He glanced at Chu Luiwei and sighed meaningfully. Yu Er's words are true. This Rong Xiu's talent and strength were indeed not inferior to hers. Just her talent as a mystic cultivator was enough to crush Zhao Zicheng. Not to mention the fact that he had formed a contract with a divine beast. Even if he didn't have a high status, having this was enough. That trace of doubt from before had completely dissipated at this moment. Shengguan Yu's heart was finally at ease. Chu Luiwei blinked her eyes and didn't know whether to laugh or cry for a moment. In fact, even she didn't know that Rong Xiu was so strong in this aspect. Even she might not be able to withstand that blow just now. Rong Xiu? How did he cultivate to such a level? Shengguan Yu stood up and looked at Rong Xiu. Rong Xiu? Very good. Rong Xiu nodded with a smile and bowed slightly. Your Majesty, you flatter me. How is that a compliment? Shengguan Yu had a good first impression of Rong Xiu. Now that he had witnessed his strength with his own eyes, he admired him even more. You are worthy of it. Rong Xiu's eyebrows moved slightly, and the smile in his eyes deepened. It seemed that today's visit to his father-in-law was quite successful. Shengguan Yu turned his gaze and looked at Zhao Zicheng. Come, help second young master Zhao to have a good rest. Zhao Zicheng's face turned red and white. Thank you for your kindness, Your Majesty. Zicheng is fine and can go back on his own. It was enough to lose this round. If he had to be helped away again, he would lose face. Zhao Zicheng wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, gritted his teeth, and looked up at Rong Xiu. You are indeed strong. There was no sarcasm or jealousy in this sentence. It came from the bottom of his heart. He was really convinced. I admit that I am not as strong as you. I admit defeat. Tomorrow, I will leave West Hill and won't disturb you anymore. When he said this, Zhao Zicheng felt as if his heart had been pierced by countless silver needles. His heart was filled with pain. He turned his head and glanced at Chu Luiwei. A glimmer of light flashed in his eyes. Then he smiled. Although he didn't get what he wanted this time, he didn't regret it. He had said and done what he needed to do. He had no regrets. Please, treat her well in the future. Zhao Zicheng covered his chest and coughed violently. Rong Xiu's eyes darkened. She is the person in my heart. I will naturally cherish her 1,000 times more than anyone else. Zhao Zicheng laughed self-deprecatingly. That's true. I worry too much. This man was completely different from Jiang Yuqing. He could give her the best. Thinking of this, Zhao Zicheng turned and left. Rong Xiu also walked toward Chu Luiwei. After taking 2 steps, Zhao Zicheng stopped again. He turned around and asked hesitantly, Can I ask you a question? Rong Xiu looked sideways. Zhao Zicheng held his breath and asked, How? How did you cultivate to this level? Rong Xiu thought of something and a faint smile suddenly appeared on his face. You taught me. He had no interest in being a mystic master. He only practiced to accompany her for a while. Digression, Rong Xiu, God knows how many skills I learned to pursue my wife. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 920. Zhao Zicheng choked and felt that Rong Xiu was joking. Back then, Shangguanyu did have astonishing talent in mystic cultivation, but she was also a level 8 mystic cultivator back then. It was impossible for her to teach someone like Rong Xiu, who could crush level 8 mystic cultivators. It seemed like he didn't want to say it. However, Zhao Zicheng didn't mind. The cultivation of mystic cultivators was different from that of martial artists. They usually needed a master to teach them step by step. This way, the master-disciple relationship would be closer. Rong Xiu might have his own considerations for not telling him his master. After all, there were indeed many reclusive experts in this world who didn't like to show their faces in public and didn't like to casually reveal their identities. To be able to nurture a disciple like Rong Xiu, he must not be a simple person. Zhao Zicheng cupped his hands and didn't ask any more questions. He turned around and limped away. His back, which was originally considered tall and slender, now had a hint of loneliness. Did you just say that I taught you? Chu Luiwen narrowed her black eyes and asked when she saw Rong Xiu walking over. She had just recovered to level 6 mystic cultivation and had yet to cross the threshold of level 7. The strength he displayed just now wasn't something she could teach. I actually didn't know that I had such an outstanding disciple. Also, this disciple is like me and has contracted a divine beast. As Chu Luiwen spoke, she turned her gaze and glanced at Xue Xue, who had followed Rong Xiu over and was about to pounce over happily. Xue Xue's movements froze. For a moment, it didn't know whether to go forward or retreat. Under Chu Luiwen's scrutinizing gaze, Xue Xue felt guilty. It shook its head and looked around. Actually, it didn't want to hide it. If it wasn't for Master's request, it wouldn't lie to her. Rong Xiu suddenly smiled. We've played chess together so many times. Even if I don't want to learn, I know a little. Chu Luiwen was stunned. Only then did he understand what Rong Xiu meant. From a certain point of view, a chess game and a profound formation shared an extremely high degree of similarity. Moreover, it tested one's agility and flexibility to an extreme degree. Usually, when she played chess, she would mix it with the Xian formation sometimes. Rong Xiu's words seemed to make sense. However, the doubts in Chu Luiwen's heart had not been completely eliminated. Even if Rong Xiu was just joking, the top-notch talent and strength that he displayed could not be mistaken. She actually didn't know that he was so powerful above mystic cultivators. There seemed to be countless mysteries hidden in his body. He was mysterious and unfathomable. However, when those eyes were looking at her, they were so sincere and clean. They were open and honest, without any concealment. She could feel his heart and inexplicably felt that no matter what, he would always stand by her side and shelter her from the wind and rain. In fact, she didn't trust people so easily. However, when facing Rong Xiu, trust and dependence seemed to have become instinctive. Everything became natural. Chu Luiwen pondered for a moment and looked at Shangguanyu. Father, I want to talk to Rong Xiu alone. How could Shangguanyu not see that Chu Luiwen had something to ask Rong Xiu? He immediately agreed. Anyway, I've already seen him. You has a good eye. If there's anything, you can discuss it yourselves. After saying that, he patted Rong Xiu's shoulder meaningfully and left. Elder Chenku wanted to go forward and ask a few questions. Seeing that Shangguanyu had left, he swallowed the rest of his words and left with the other elders. However, after walking for a long distance, Elder Chenku still looked dignified. That Rong Xiu doesn't seem to be as simple as he looks on the surface. When most of the people around had left, Chu Luiwen said, "Let's go back to Zhaoyu Hall." Rong Xiu stepped forward and held her hand with a doting smile on his lips. Chu Luiwen glared at him. "What are you doing?" Rong Xiu turned his face, leaned closer and chuckled. "Exercising my fiancé's rights." The news that Chu Luiwen had a fiancé from Prince Yao Chen's 7th prince spread rapidly in the palace as if it had grown wings. At the same time, Zhao Zicheng challenged Chu Luiyue to a battle in order to marry her. In the end, he lost miserably, which immediately became the topic of everyone's conversation. When most people heard the first news, they were just shocked and surprised. But thinking about it carefully, this was actually quite normal. After all, Chu Luiyue seemed to be a girl from a fallen family in country Yaochen. Marrying a prince was actually a social climb. However, the second news was too strange. Who was Zhao Zicheng? The second son of the Zhao family. The most outstanding genius of the Zhao family's younger generation. Even though he wasn't in Xiling these few years, most people still remembered how amazing he was back then. They heard that he had already broken through the bottleneck and become a level 8 mystic master. That Rong Xiu actually defeated him. It was simply unbelievable. Didn't this prove that he was even more outstanding than Zhao Zicheng? A prince from a small affiliated country? These things quickly caused a huge uproar in Xiling, and Rong Xiu's name quickly became the focus of everyone's discussion. No matter how turbulent the undercurrents were outside, Zhao Yuhao was silent at this moment. Chu Luiyue dismissed her attendants, leaving only her and Rong Xiu in the room. Oh, and Shui. Ever since she came in, Shui had consciously found a corner to lie down, looking as if she had been wronged and admitted her mistake. Looking at its drooping brows, those who didn't know would think that it had just suffered a huge blow. Who would be able to compare this listless white lion with the divine beast that tore an 8th-level Xian formation apart with a single claw? However, Chu Luiyue was rather satisfied with Shui's proactive attitude of admitting its mistakes. Compared to its master, it was simply too obedient. Chu Luiyue looked at Rong Xiu and narrowed her eyes dangerously. Rong Xiu, don't you have anything to say to me? Rong Xiu's long eyelashes fluttered, and he smiled. What do you want to hear? Asking the obvious. Chu Luiyue's gaze scanned him from head to toe. Then, let's start with your strength. You should be a level 9 mystic master now, right? Rong Xiu's lips moved slightly. He wanted to say no, but he swallowed the words back. He nodded. Hearing him admit it himself, Chu Luiyue, who had already expected this, still felt her brows twitch fiercely. Even back then, she couldn't cross the threshold of level 9 mystic master. She didn't expect Rong Xiu to be one long ago. Why didn't you say so before? Chu Luiyue's tone carried a hint of warning. Rong Xiu blinked innocently. You didn't ask. Chu Luiyue, she couldn't refute this. Then let me ask you now. Other than being a level 9 mystic master, are you also a celestial physician? Chu Luiyue took a deep breath and asked. Rong Xiu slowly leaned back in his chair and tapped the table rhythmically with one hand. After a moment, he looked up. There seemed to be a dense light in his eyes, and his voice was low and languid. What do you think? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 921. Chu Luiyue's eyebrows twitched. The meaning of Rong Xiu's words was self-explanatory. She narrowed her eyes. Then your celestial physician rank. Rong Xiu pondered for a moment and smiled faintly. I know a little. Chu Luiyue's mouth twitched. She would be a fool to believe him. Since when are the disciples of Mingyue Tianshan so powerful? Chu Luiyue had never been to Mingyue Tianshan personally, but she knew a little about it. Mingyue Tianshan was a sect that was independent of the various empires and had a rather aloof feeling. Compared to empires of Yao Chen's level, it was a little stronger. This was also the reason why Rong Xiu was sent to Mingyue Tianshan when he was born in poor health. There were powerhouses that the Yao Chen Empire could not match. However, although Mingyue Tianshan was powerful, it was still outside Heaven's canopy and could not be compared to the Tianling dynasty. Then, how did they nurture a powerhouse like Rong Xiu? Rong Xiu seemed to have seen through her doubts, so he leaned back and looked at her with interest. You were born in Yao Chen. Aren't you already a powerhouse that ordinary people can't reach? Chu Luiyue was speechless for a moment. After her rebirth, she did not have the Tianjing Yuan meridian from her previous life. It was almost as if she had to start from scratch. She had indeed suffered a lot on the way back from Yaochen to Xiling. At the same time, she had encountered enough luck to be where she was today. If she could do it, why couldn't others? Moreover, from the beginning, she had already determined that Rongxiu was extremely dangerous. At that time, she had already expected that he was extraordinary. But now, she clearly realized that she was much stronger than he had imagined. Chu Luwei was silent for a while before she said, "Rongxiu, you still haven't told me where your identity as the Son of God came from." As soon as he finished speaking, the room fell into silence. Rongxiu looked into her eyes. There seemed to be waves of light swirling in his phoenix eyes, like a whirlpool that could completely devour people. After a while, Rongxiu suddenly said, "Do you still remember my mother?" Chu Luwei was a little surprised by his sudden question, but he still nodded. Who didn't know Consort Wan, who was the queen of the empire of Yao Chen's harem back then? Rongxiu smiled, but there was no smile in his eyes. His voice was extremely light. "The so-called Holy Son is my identity in my mother's family." Chu Luwei had thought of many answers before, but none of them were close to this. His mother's family? Didn't they say that Consort Wan came from an ordinary family? How come now? Chu Luwei suddenly recalled the day when the third prince led his troops to rebel. Rongxiu and Emperor Jiawen seemed to have a decisive battle. At that time, when Emperor Jiawen wanted to break through and enter heaven's canopy, Rongxiu once said something. He seemed to have said that his mother's wish in life was to not let Emperor Jiawen step into heaven's canopy. Now that he thought about it, the cause and effect of everything could be explained. Chu Luwei widened her eyes slightly. "Why your mother is from heaven's canopy?" Rongxiu nodded. Chu Luwei was dazed for quite a while. "I see," she had suspected it before, but as too many things happened later on, she had thrown this matter to the back of her mind. This means that Rongxiu is actually from heaven's canopy. His mother's status is clearly much higher than Emperor Jiawen's. Back then, my mother went out of heaven's canopy to train. When she met with danger in a territory, she met father by accident, and the two of them got together. But when they got married, my mother didn't know father's identity." Rongxiu lightly said. Chu Luwei pressed her lips against each other. Even though Rongxiu said it very simply, she could roughly guess the ins and outs of the matter. A woman from heaven's canopy who married Emperor Jiawen was marrying a lower status. Besides, from various situations, Rongxiu's mother's clan didn't seem to be an ordinary family. Consort Wan was young and naive. When she met Emperor Jiawen, she thought that she was destined to be with him, so she didn't hesitate to be with him. In the end, she didn't expect that she would marry an emperor with a harem of 3,000. No one would be willing to accept and forgive such deceit. It was no wonder that there were rumors that after Consort Wan entered the palace, she was still depressed even though Emperor Jiawen doted on her a lot. She only stayed in the palace for a year or two before moving out. She also didn't go back until she died. As for her background, it should be made up by Emperor Jiawen. After I was born, mother sent me to Mingyue Tianshan. A few years later, the clan's people came and wanted to bring mother and me back. It was a pity that mother had already passed away. Rongxiu's tone was calm, and his expression was quiet as if he were talking about someone else's matters. Back then, mother secretly married an outsider, and it went against the clan's rules. After she found out about father's identity, she became a concubine and was too ashamed to return home. Thus, she kept hiding from the clan's people until she passed away. Actually, back then, she sent Rongxiu to Mingyue Tianshan because she didn't want his identity to be exposed. She thought that she could be at ease if she handed Rongxiu over there. However, many things that she didn't expect happened after that. Of course, she wouldn't know about all of this. Chu Luwei looked at him with a normal expression as if she had already seen through all of this, but her heart still ached slightly. "So, all these years, you haven't been staying at Mingyue Tianshan?" she asked softly. Rongxiu responded. "I would come back occasionally, but I wouldn't stay for long. I didn't find a suitable time to tell you about this. Are you still angry?" Chu Luwei sighed in her heart and shook her head. It was naturally very difficult for him to return to the clan with such a background. Rong Xiu had a grudge against Emperor Zhouwen, and they had completely fallen out back then. Hence, he definitely wouldn't be willing to go back to Emperor Yao Chen. This was probably one of the reasons why he decided to give Emperor Yao Chen's throne to the third prince after planning everything. As for his mother's family, it was obvious that his identity was a little awkward. Rong Xiu, it must have been tough on you all these years, right? From what Rong Xiu said previously, it wasn't hard to guess how strict Consort Wan's family was. And Rong Xiu, to them, they might not be willing to accept him. Rong Xiu thought for a while. It's all right. Even if he obtained the position of Prince of Grace, many people were eyeing him covetously, and many wanted to rebel. Hence, it was a little troublesome to deal with them. Rong Xiu nodded and saw her heart-aching eyes. He smiled slightly, held her hand tightly, and pulled her into his embrace. Her gentle and sweet aura instantly filled his arms. He hugged her slender waist and buried his head in her shoulder, smelling the faint fragrance of her cloud-like hair. A certain empty place in his heart seemed to have been filled. I'm fine. He spoke softly as if he was murmuring and pouring out his heart. I have you, with you, it's enough. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from iYuan. Chapter 9:22. Chu Liuyue's heart softened, and she lowered her head and gently kissed him on the lips. It was slightly cool and soft. Rong Xiu, I'll be your family in the future, okay? She retreated half an inch, stared into his eyes, and said seriously. Even though Rong Xiu didn't say it, she could feel the lonely aura on him, as if it came from his bones. His hands were cold and so were his lips. But she thought his heart was warm. If he was alone in this world, she was willing to stay by his side. With true love, as close as family. She didn't want to ask anything else. She only knew that he was him. Everything else had nothing to do with them. Whether he was the seventh prince of Yao Qin or the holy son of a certain family, it didn't matter. What mattered was that they were each other's. Rong Xiu looked at her. Suddenly he hugged her tightly with one hand, held her face with the other, and kissed her. His hand was very strong, as if he wanted to crush her into his bones and blood. However, his other hand was unbelievably careful, as if he was holding a rare treasure and was afraid of bumping into it. Amidst the endless madness, there was also a strong restraint that was filled with love. The vague words scattered between his lips and teeth. Rong Xiu's victory over Zhao Zicheng had a far greater impact than expected. Because other than Zhao Zicheng, there were many young talents in Shilling City who had some thoughts about Chu Luiyue. Whether it was identity, appearance, or talent, the current Chu Luiyue was absolutely top-notch. When she was still the princess, countless people admired her. Now that she had killed Jiang Yuqing and Shangguan Wan, ascended to the throne, and returned in glory, countless people naturally bowed to her. However, Rong Xiu's appearance instantly disrupted these people's thoughts. Zhao Zicheng was the first to be beaten up. The rest of the people naturally calmed down and had to think carefully. Even a level 8 mystic master was defeated by Rong Xiu. One could imagine how strong he was. It was impossible to say that he wasn't afraid. But at the same time, there were also many people who were skeptical. Zhao Zicheng was a famous genius in the Western Tomb and could be said to be one of the best among the younger generation. How could he lose to a mere prince from Yao Qin? However, the news did indeed come from the palace. It was said that there were many people who saw it with their own eyes. For a time, there were different opinions, which made many people curious about Rong Xiu. Countless people wanted to see for themselves what kind of person this Rong Xiu was. Chu Luiyue had originally planned to wait until the matters in the Tianling dynasty were settled before confessing everything to Rong Xiu and putting the wedding on the agenda. However, he did not expect that Chu Ning would be taken away. After this incident, the wedding could not be carried out for the time being. Even though the other party didn't seem to want to hurt Chu Ning on the note, Chu Luiyue was still very worried. From the beginning until now, the other party knew her identity like the back of his hand. It was obvious that he was targeting her. However, she knew nothing about the other party. After thinking about it, she asked Rong Xiu again. This time, Rong Xiu didn't hesitate and nodded directly. He knew where the note came from. But when Chu Luiwei wanted to continue asking, Rong Xiu didn't continue to answer and only said that it was not suitable for her to know these things now. Chu Luiwei was a little confused by this answer. Then when will I find out? Rong Xiu paused. The current Chu Luiwei was only a rank 6 warrior. Even if she knew these things, there was nothing she could do and it would only increase her worries. If you break through to rank 7 in a month, I will tell you. Chu Luiwei frowned slightly. Breaking through to rank 7 wasn't difficult for her. The difficult part was achieving her goal in this short month. One had to know that she had just returned from the Red Moon Desert and had just reached the middle of rank 6. This speed was already very fast. If she broke through to rank 7, it would be terrifying. As if seeing her concerns, Rong Xiu smiled. If you trusts me, I will be your sparring partner for this month. How about it? Chu Luiwei looked at his confident and calm smile, and her heart suddenly ignited with fighting spirit. It's a deal. There was also a martial arts field in the backyard of Zhaoyu Hall. It was even bigger and of higher quality than the one in Yuanhe Hall. This was because this was the place where Chu Luiwei used to cultivate. Other than the ground being paved with incomparably hard green stones, there was a level 9 Xian formation on the entire martial arts training ground as a protection. It could ensure that any fluctuations produced in the martial arts training ground would not casually spread to the outside and would not harm others. Chu Luiwei and Rong Xiu stood face to face. As the order had already been given, there were no palace servants around to serve them. There were only the two of them in the huge martial arts field. Chu Luiwei looked at Rong Xiu opposite her. Thinking that the two of them had known each other for so long but had never really fought, she couldn't help but be eager to try. She had long known that Rong Xiu was very strong. It wasn't easy to wait until now and she was able to recover a part of her strength. Perhaps she could compete with him? With that thought, Chu Luiwei's eyes lit up. Rong Xiu looked at her excited face and raised his eyebrows slightly. This familiar scene was really nostalgic. Rong Xiu, you don't have to go easy on me later. Just attack. Chu Luiwei was sure that she wouldn't be a match for Rong Xiu in terms of Xian master. But for martial artists, that might not be the case. After all, although she looked like she was only at the middle of rank 6, her combat power had already reached the level of a rank 7 martial artist. The bitter training she had gone through in the Red Moon Desert wasn't for nothing. Rong Xiu smiled and responded. Okay. Shui, who was lying in the field, looked at her master with disdain. You don't even have a draft when you lie, Pui. Rong Xiu sensed Shui's gaze and glanced at it coldly. Let's not talk about the past. Now that you hadn't fully recovered, if he really attacked without holding back and hurt his wife, he would be the one feeling heartache. What else could he do if he could only pamper the wife he pursued? At this moment, Chu Luiwei moved and went straight for Rong Xiu. She was extremely fast. In the Red Moon Desert, Chu Luiwei's most obvious improvement was her close combat power after fighting with those puppets. Therefore, her speed had increased by a lot. In addition, now that she had recovered her identity, she didn't need to hide the many cultivation techniques that she had cultivated in the past. Naturally, it was more convenient. In the blink of an eye, the slender and tall figure had already rushed in front of Rong Xiu. She clenched her fist and threw a punch. Before she could see how Rong Xiu moved, his figure had already disappeared in front of her. Chu Luiwei missed her attack, so she turned around without thinking and gave a side kick. Bang! Rong Xiu easily clamped down on her ankle with one hand. Chu Luiwei was shocked and took advantage of the situation to flip in the air. Rong Xiu quickly released his hand and avoided her attack. Tisk! Are you trying to murder your husband? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 923. Chu Luiwei landed lightly on the ground like a swallow. She looked at Rong Xiu and snorted when she heard his teasing. You can easily block my attack without using your full strength. Isn't it inappropriate for you to say that? Rong Xiu didn't even make a move just now. He just defended himself. But even so, she was still able to sense that his cultivation level was definitely far above hers. As your sparring partner, you have to have some strength. Otherwise, what if you get beaten down? Rong Xiu raised his hand with his palm facing up. He bent his fingers slightly and said with a smile, "Are you coming?" Chu Luiwei gritted her teeth. The force in her body surged crazily, and her aura rose to its peak. A star gradually flickered on the tip of her finger. Come, Jingshan finger. It was impossible to pose any threat to Rong Xiu with a small fight. She could only go all out now. A satisfied smile flashed across Rong Xiu's eyes. If she wanted to improve her strength quickly and steadily, she had to constantly challenge her limits. Coincidentally, he knew where her limits were the best. Therefore, he was the most suitable person to be this person. In the next moment, a cluster of golden flames appeared in Rong Xiu's palm. After Elder Chen Ku returned, he pondered for a long time and finally went to see Shang Guanyu. When he arrived at Yuanhe Hall, Shang Guanyu was reading in his room. He raised his head when he heard the commotion. "You're finally here." He didn't look surprised. Apparently, he had already expected this. "Please take a seat." Elder Chen Ku was an elder of 3 dynasties. His status was extraordinary. Even Shang Guanyu had to be polite to him. Seeing Shang Guanyu's reaction, Elder Chen Ku knew that they were thinking about the same thing. Therefore, he didn't stand on ceremony and sat down. It seems that His Majesty also feels that something is wrong. Elder Chen Ku frowned and went straight to the point. "That Rong Xiu's identity? I'm afraid it's not that simple. Based on the strength that he had displayed previously, how could a prince of country Yaochen possess such strength? Even if he was talented, without sufficient resources and opportunities, it was impossible for him to reach his current level. I've seen his father before." Shang Guanyu put down the book in his hand and suddenly said such a sentence. Mediocre and mediocre. Even if such a person was fortunate enough to give birth to a talented child, it wouldn't be too exaggerated. Rong Xiu was obviously far surpassed the standard. "You mean?" Elder Chen Ku was bewildered. "I have a feeling I've seen his aura before." Shang Guanyu rubbed his temples. "But I can't remember at the moment." However, he had a good impression of Rong Xiu the moment he saw him. Therefore, she didn't continue to ask him many questions, but let you ask him. "Elder Chen, what do you—" "Since he is here, he must have something." Elder Chen Ke hesitated for a while. "Is Zhou's to—" Shang Guanyu paused and looked up with a sharp glint in his eyes. "Elder Chen Ku, do you think so too?" Level 9 mystic cultivators are extremely strong, just like level 9 warriors. They are only one step away from the next level. There are only a few of such cultivators in the entire Tianling dynasty. Rong Xiu is so young, but he's already at this level. Other than that side, who else can nurture such a person? Shang Guanyu stroked his beard and seemed to agree. "That's what I think too. You was born with a Tianjin Yuan meridian and was a once-in-a-thousand-years genius. That's why she could reach a level that ordinary people can't reach in their lifetime. As for Rong Xiu, he couldn't see through. Taizu should know more about this matter, right?" Elder Chen Ke looked a little serious. "But it seems that Taizu didn't talk to her about this. Taizu must have his own considerations. Maybe he has already told you." Shang Guanyu pondered for a moment. "Now that you has ascended to the throne, many things have settled down. I'll find a time to talk to her in detail." Elder Chen Ku nodded and then murmured curiously. "If Rong Xiu is really someone from that side, why did he appear as Prince Yaochen? His Majesty was killed back then, and he was reborn over there. Isn't this too much of a coincidence?" There was one more thing that Elder Chen Ku didn't say. If Rong Xiu's real identity is really as we think, then it's really hard to say who's going to marry who in this marriage. Shang Guanyu fell into deep thought and waved his hand. "Forget it. As long as you recognizes him and he recognizes you, it's fine. As for the rest, there's no need to care so much. By the way, I asked you to investigate Jiang Yuqing before. What did you find out? Elder Chen calmed down and sat up straight. His expression was much more serious. You don't say. I really found something wrong. Jiang Yuqing seems to have been secretly contacting someone in the past few years. Moreover, it seems that he has been following the other party's orders and has been working for the other party. It's just that he has been very secretive, so we can't find out who the other party is. Sheng Guanyu snorted coldly. So, there's really a master behind him? Yes. In addition, Elder Chen hesitated for a moment and stopped talking. In addition? Sheng Guanyu asked. In addition, Mu Qinghe seems to have something to do with this matter. Sheng Guanyu frowned tightly. He's Jiang Yuqing's man. It's normal to have something to do with him. No. Elder Chen shook his head. If Mu Qinghe is simply Jiang Yuqing's subordinate, it stands to reason that she is not qualified to contact the person behind this. But that's not the case. She seems to have contacted the person behind Jiang Yuqing's back. Digression. The 5th update is a little late. Happy Chinese Valentine's Day, everyone. Don't forget to receive the monthly Red Packet. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 924. Really? This time, Sheng Guanyu was really taken aback. After thinking for a moment, he slowly said, in this case, Mu Qinghe may not be completely Jiang Yuqing's man, but what was his purpose for doing this? When Yu asked if Mu Qinghe had betrayed her, Mu Qinghe admitted it without hesitation. From the beginning to the end, he didn't defend himself. Mu Qinghe was personally trained and promoted by Yu. Compared to others, their relationship was naturally much deeper. And his actions made Yu feel a sense of betrayal, which was even more intense compared to other people. According to what Mu Qinghe said before, he was Jiang Yuqing's man from the beginning. But from the current situation, it seemed that there was something fishy. If there was an inside story, why did he have to do this? As if he couldn't wait to be sentenced to death? Is Mu Qinghe still imprisoned in the Mu mansion? Sheng Guanyu stood up, but after taking 2 steps, he stopped again. Elder Chen asked tentatively, Your Majesty, do you want to go to the Mu mansion and ask in person? Sheng Guanyu put one hand behind his back and shook his head. Forget it. If he doesn't want to say, no one can get anything out of him. I'll tell you this news when I have the chance in the future. I'll make a decision later. Elder Chen nodded and asked again, then Rong Xiu, let's wait and see first. Yes. Mu Mansion. The courtyard was cold and cheerless. Other than a few armored blackguards patrolling the area, there was no one else around. Jian Fengqi stood at the door. Seeing this scene, he couldn't help but sigh with mixed feelings. Sigh. In the past, although Mu Mansion was only guarded by the Black Cavalry, the atmosphere at that time was very different from now. In the past, it was still a bit lively, but now, it was no different from a prison. He had always stayed away from this kind of place, but now he had to come. Jian Fengqi, you're here again? A figure flashed, and I appeared. After removing Lei Laoxi's mask, the current Mitsui looked much more refined than before, and he was also thinner than before. However, he still looked very strong and sturdy. In addition to his tyrannical strength, he was able to create an invisible pressure just by standing there. Jian Fengqi coughed. It's fine if you come once or twice, but you come every day. Mitsui looked at him suspiciously, smacked his lips, and finally couldn't help but ask the question that had been bothering him. What is he trying to do? Jian Fengqi accepted his fate and walked inside. Is he still doing nothing in his room today? Yeah. I shrugged. You can go by yourself. Ever since His Highness came, the 3 of them had a talk in the room. He didn't know what they said, but after that, their reactions were very strange. His Highness seemed to be in a daze, and after she left, Jian Fengqi scolded Mu Qinghe for an hour in exasperation. He didn't say anything specific, but the main idea was that she didn't know what was good for her. As for Mu Qinghe, since that day, he had been staying in his room and never came out. His Highness didn't restrict his freedom when he locked him up in the Mu residence, but he didn't seem to want to come out. Hence, ever since then, Jian Fengqi came every day. However, it didn't seem to be effective. Mu Qinghe was a stubborn person who would not be moved by force or persuasion. Tai crossed his arms and shook his head. Actually, he couldn't figure it out either. Back then, Her Highness was devoted to Mu Qinghe and was even more devoted to him than to the 13th Yu Guard. How could Mu Qinghe, this ingrate, betray Her Highness? Yet, His Highness didn't have the intention to kill him until now. I swung the hammer in his hand and walked away. The door wasn't locked. Jian Fengqi pushed the door open and saw Mu Qinghe sitting there. Hearing the noise, he didn't react, as if he didn't care at all. Seeing him like this, Jian Fengqi was furious. He snorted and leaned against the door frame. Are you going to be like this forever? Mu Qinghe didn't say anything. Are you happy to say those words on purpose and make her run away? Jian Fengqi frowned. His eyes, which had always been flirtatious, seemed to be covered with a layer of thick frost at this time. Mu Qinghe finally reacted. I'm just telling the truth. If you do something wrong, you should be punished. Jian Fengqi was so angry that his teeth itched. Bullshit. Now isn't the time for you to beg me to help her find evidence. Jian Fengqi quickly stepped forward and grabbed Mu Qinghe's collar. Believe it or not, I'm going to tell her everything right now. Mu Qinghe frowned and pried his hand away. It doesn't matter if you tell her. Can you prove that I have nothing to do with what happened in the past? It doesn't matter whether she kills me or not. Now that the truth is out, everything is fine, isn't it? I think Jian Fengqi wasn't happy to hear this. He was about to hit him again when he inadvertently caught a glimpse of blood on the back of his hand. He suddenly froze and took a closer look. He wasn't injured, and Mu Qinghe was the only one who touched his hand just now. This was Mu Qinghe's blood. Jian Fengqi's face suddenly changed. What's wrong with you? Mu Qinghe saw the blood on the back of his hand and frowned. He was so careless. It's nothing. Mu Qinghe said lightly. She nonchalantly took a handkerchief from the side and wiped the blood off her hand. But that white handkerchief was soon completely stained with blood. The corner of Jian Fengqi's eyes twitched violently. The amount of blood Mu Qinghe was bleeding. Something was clearly wrong. He chased after Mu Qinghe and made a move, wanting to grab him. Mu Qinghe dodged easily, but she lost her balance and crashed into the chair next to her. Mu Qinghe managed to catch her with difficulty, but her face turned pale and blood flowed out from the corner of her mouth. Jian Fengqi was even more shocked. This is thump. Mu Qinghe fainted and suddenly collapsed to the ground. Zhao Yu Palace. Time passed by minute. Unknowingly, it was already evening. The sun was setting in the west, reflecting a gorgeous glow on the thick clouds. The sparring between Chu Luiwei and Rong Xiu had finally come to an end. Her clothes were drenched in sweat, and her strength was almost completely exhausted. On the other hand, other than Rong Xiu's slightly messy clothes, there was nothing unusual about him. It was as if he had just taken a leisurely stroll instead of sparring with Chu Luiwei for so long. Chu Luiwei panted heavily, looking at Rong Xiu, and couldn't help but grind her teeth. This man had always suppressed his strength to a level higher than hers. How infuriating! You actually hid so much of your strength. She was about to walk forward, but her body went limp and she fell forward directly. Rong Xiu went forward and pulled her into his arms, then carried her horizontally with a smile on his lips. Not at all, I'm just a little stronger than you this time. You'll definitely win next time. Chu Luiwei pinched his face and snorted heavily. I'll definitely surpass you next time on the Qingyun roll. Digression. Happy Chinese Valentine's Day again, mobile users. Please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 925. Rong Xiu's movements suddenly paused. His brows twitched imperceptibly as he looked at Chu Luiwei in his arms and slowly asked, "What did you just say?" Chu Luiwei was also stunned. The azure cloud roll, what was that? Why would she suddenly say such a thing? It was as if she had said the same thing before. I don't know either. Chu Liwei murmured and immediately frowned as she kept recalling and searching in her mind. But she couldn't remember anything. Rong Xiu stared at her face and saw a faint layer of doubt in her eyes. His hanging heart relaxed a little. He calmly turned his gaze away and lowered his eyelids to hide the emotions in his eyes. "I'll send you back first." Chu Liwei nodded absent-mindedly as she wrapped her arms around Rong Xiu's neck and leaned on his shoulder as she thought about what had just happened. The Azure Cloud Roll. She said that she must win against Rong Xiu on the Azure Cloud Roll next time? Rong Xiu. She suddenly spoke and glanced at Rong Xiu. "Have you heard of the Azure Cloud Roll?" The man shook his head as the afterglow shone on his smooth and perfect side profile. It was still breathtaking. But he didn't say anything. Chu Liwei had some doubts in her heart. Rong Xiu's meaning was that he didn't know. But why would she say such a thing to Rong Xiu just now? Perhaps this was related to the memory she had lost? Chu Liwei fell into deep thought and planned to find a chance to think about it when she returned. Rong Xiu carried her and walked back. Fortunately, after Chu Liwei returned, she had cleaned up the people in the palace. There were almost no palace servants left in Zhaoyu Hall. In addition, this martial arts field was a relatively private place in Zhaoyu Hall. From here, she could directly return to her sleeping quarters. Rong Xiu didn't meet anyone along the way, so he directly carried her to her bedroom. "You." Just as he shouted, he suddenly realized that the person in his arms was quiet. He looked down and saw that the woman in his arms was leaning on his shoulder with her eyes closed. Her breathing was even and she seemed to have fallen asleep. Rong Xiu couldn't help but laugh, but he also felt a little heartache. It was probably because the previous training was too tiring. However, the fact that she could fall asleep so quickly in his arms proved that she was at ease. This made Rong Xiu feel a lot more relieved. He carefully placed her on the bed, wiped her sweat, and covered her with a thin blanket. Looking at her peaceful sleeping face, Rong Xiu's eyes gradually overflowed with gentleness. When she was like this in the past, although she was often exhausted, it was very rare for her to fall asleep directly. Returning to the West Hill for revenge this time must have consumed a lot of her energy and mental energy. It was a good thing that she could have a good rest now. Rong Xiu held her wrist. A pure and gentle energy slowly flowed into her body. In her sleep, she seemed to be dreaming of something and whispered something. Rong Xiu listened and vaguely heard that it was related to the green cloud roll. He frowned slightly. Now that she had not broken through to the 7th level, it was reasonable to say that that thing was still sealed in her body and she should not be thinking of this. But it seemed that it was much faster than he had expected. With the nourishment of Rong Xiu's power, Chu Liu's brows gradually relaxed and she finally fell asleep peacefully. Rong Xiu stood in his original spot quietly for a while and looked at Tuanzi, who had appeared at the side without him knowing. "Take good care of her." Tuanzi nodded sensibly, which was rare for her. Rong Xiu then turned and left. Xue followed closely behind. Walking out of Zhaoyu Hall, Rong Xiu looked into the distance and in a certain direction. If he remembered correctly, Huayang Hall should be over there. It was also the place where Shangguan Wan and Jiang Yuqing were imprisoned. Rong Xiu thought for a while and turned around to leave the palace. Chu Liwei had a long and messy dream. In the dream, she seemed to be competing with someone in order to win first place on the green cloud roll. The other party's face and figure were very blurry, but his strength was extremely strong. She lost again and again, and lost again and again. Sometimes it was very quiet, sometimes it was very noisy, as if many people were watching and cheering. She wanted to see the other party's face clearly, but she could not. After some time, even she could not remember how many times she had competed. She finally won the competition again. She was very happy, and the person opposite her seemed to be very happy too. Someone was shouting something around them. She vaguely heard that it seemed to be. The person opposite her suddenly took a step forward. It was as if he had suddenly broken through a layer of fog. His figure gradually became clear. It was a young man wearing a black brocade robe, with a green jade belt around his waist, easily outlining the man's tall figure with wide shoulders and narrow waist. He seemed to have said something to her. The surroundings were quiet for a moment, and then there was a burst of enthusiastic cheers and screams, as if it was boiling. As for his face, it was gradually revealed. Whoosh! Chu Liwei suddenly opened her eyes. Her body was covered in cold sweat, and her heart was beating so fast that her ears were numb. She calmed down for a while before she realized that she was dreaming. Dumpling flew over and rubbed against her face intimately. Chu Liwei hugged Dumpling in her arms, and the waves in her heart gradually calmed down. After waking up, everything in the dream began to quickly forget. That man's figure seemed very familiar. But that face, in the end, she did not see it clearly. An absurd thought was born in her heart. She vaguely felt that the man in the dream who was competing with her seemed to be the one on the octagonal pavilion on the cliff. And he was extremely similar to the first master. Night fell. The 100 Herbs building was already closed, and Yu Ling was checking things on the 3rd floor. Suddenly, he heard something. When he turned around, he was so scared that his heart almost jumped out. "Master!" He hurriedly bowed. "Master, why are you now?" Rong Xiu waved his hand. "I'm just here to take something." Yu Ling heaved a sigh of relief. God knows how he felt when he turned around and saw his master standing there. Yu Ling hurriedly responded. Seeing Rong Xiu walk inside, he was still very surprised. Now, his master's name was well known in West Hill. Everyone knew that the new emperor had a fiancée. Although he was born in Yaochen, he defeated Zhao Zicheng. "Did you pick it for madam?" Yu Ling followed him and asked carefully. In fact, when he learned that Chu Liwei was actually from Shangguanyu, he was also very shocked. He was wondering why his master returned to Yaochen back then. So that was the reason. Rong Xiu nodded and walked to an inconspicuous shelf. On it was a fist-sized, inconspicuous pine stone jade box. Perhaps it was because it had not been touched for a long time, but it was covered with a faint layer of dust. Rong Xiu did not seem to care and raised his hand to take it. Yu Ling was slightly surprised. So this was what his master wanted. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 926. Yu Ling wanted to ask something, but he didn't. Rong Xiu had just put away the green pine stone jade box when there was a knock on the door. "Master, I have something to report." It was Yu Mo's voice. Yu Ling looked at Rong Xiu. Rong Xiu said lightly, "Just come in." Yu Ling then understood that it was his master who called Yu Mo over. Yu Mo pushed the door open and entered. When he saw Yu Ling, he nodded gently and then bowed to Rong Xiu. "Master, you guessed right. Jiang Yuqing has contacted that person again." Yu Ling was shocked when he heard this and immediately said, "Master, I'll go and guard outside." Rong Xiu nodded, and Yu Ling hurriedly left. When he left, he even carefully closed the door. Walking out of the door, Yu Ling's expression was slightly serious. It seemed that his master was going to make a move. Yu Mo had been staying in West Hill during this period, secretly investigating Jiang Yuqing's matter. After the matter was exposed some time ago, the entire Jiang family was executed, and Jiang Yuqing was also imprisoned. Yu Mo waited for a long time before he finally found this clue. The time should be yesterday. A look of disdain flashed across Yu Mo's eyes. He chose this time because everyone in the Jiang family is dead, and everyone has lowered their guard against him. This Jiang Yuqing is really selfish. In order to survive, he is willing to let the entire family die with him. Rong Xiu smiled faintly. He has always only cared about himself, so it's not surprising that he would do such a thing. Jiang Yuqing thought that he had climbed up the social ladder, but he was just too smart. "Have you found out the identity of that person?" Yu Mo paused and shook his head. "I only found out that the other party is Jiang Yuqing's backer, but I didn't find out his identity." Rong Xiu didn't seem to care. "If it's so easy for you to find out, then I'm too incompetent. Jiang Yuqing is now trapped in Huayang Palace. How did the news get out?" Yu Mo's expression became serious. "There's a special way to send messages in Huayang Palace." Mu Manor. The next day, the morning sun shone in through the window. Mu Qinghe's eyes moved, and he finally opened them. His vision was blurry at first, and then he subconsciously closed his eyes. "You're awake?" A cold voice came from the side. Mu Qinghe turned to look and saw a familiar face. Jian Fengqi crossed his arms as he sneered at him. There were 2 dark circles under his eyes, and he looked a little haggard, as if he hadn't rested well. "S to me to saves to dis, from now on tes. Understand? To him to his, is tos t to see his is tos her, s's, ss dis." He knew his own body. Jian Fengqi didn't need to. Hearing this, Jian Fengqi was instantly infuriated, and he couldn't wait to go forward and beat him up. Thinking that he was the one who saved Mu Qinghe, he suppressed his anger and pointed at Mu Qinghe angrily. "You're really something. I must have had nothing better to do to help you." Mu Qinghe leaned against the bed and closed her eyes, seemingly unmoved. "You're not the only one I owe my life to." Chu Liuyue's was already too much for him to pay off. Jian Fengqi suppressed his anger and didn't want to continue arguing with him. He stepped forward, pulled a chair, and sat opposite Mu Qinghe. "Speak. What's wrong with your body?" Mu Qinghe said indifferently. "'Tis just an old injury." Jian Fengqi sneered. "Do you really think I'm a celestial physician for nothing? The poison in your body is quite old, isn't it? It's extremely cold and has already penetrated deep into your organs. Even if you can't clear it, you'll be dead by now. This kind of poison doesn't exist in the West Hill, nor in the entire Tianling. Don't tell me you don't know." Mu Qinghe didn't say anything, as if she couldn't be bothered to explain. The 2 fell into a silent confrontation. After a while, Jian Fengqi stood up. "Don't worry. I can't do anything about your poison, but that doesn't mean others can't. I'll go to the palace and ask someone." He turned around and left. Just as he was about to step out of the door, he heard a voice behind him. "Wait!" Chongshu Pavilion. Yi Ranran arrived at the herb garden early in the morning, ready to take care of the herbs. But when she arrived, she saw that someone was already there. She took a closer look and exclaimed in surprise, "You're a genius." "Pavilion Master?" Yuchi Song cut off the withered leaves of the longtime Ganoderma in her hand and straightened up. She smiled kindly at Yi Ranran. Yi Ranran walked over and asked curiously, "Pavilion Master, why are you here personally?" Yuchi Song smiled. "I have nothing to do anyway, so I came to take a look." Yi Ranran squinted her eyes. "You miss Luyu?" Most of these herbs were taken care of by Luyu. It wasn't hard to understand why the Pavilion Master was here. Yuchi Song smiled and gently knocked on her head. "You can call her that in our Chongshu Pavilion, but you can't call her that outside." She had regained her identity. Moreover, she was the emperor and the supreme existence of the Tianling dynasty. Naturally, she couldn't be treated as casually as before. Yi Ranran stuck out her tongue. Ranran knows. It took her a long time to accept this matter. "Pavilion Master, if you miss her, why don't you just go to the palace?" After all, the Pavilion Master was Lu Yu's master, wasn't she? Yuchi Song sighed and shook her head. She must be very busy this time. Besides, Pavilion Master. Lu Jiao suddenly ran over quickly. Pavilion Master, Chide said he remembered what happened in Nanjiang. Yuchi Song's eyes lit up. Let's go. Shilin City seemed to gradually calm down. The Jiang family and the Xiahou family, who had once been arrogant and insufferably arrogant, were completely destroyed overnight. In addition, many clans and people were also implicated and robbed in this turmoil. Days passed, and these shocking events seemed to gradually subside. People were very forgetful. Not long after, Shilin City had already regained its usual liveliness. It was as if those things had never happened. And the strong smell of blood after the beheading finally dissipated completely. Ordinary people continued their lives as usual. It was as if they had long forgotten about Shangguan Wan and Jiang Yuqing who were imprisoned. However, in a place where everyone couldn't see, there was a surging undercurrent. A month passed in the blink of an eye. It was almost the 1-month period agreed on the note. In Zhaoyu Palace, Chu Luiyue was cultivating. She sat cross-legged with her hands on her knees. Vigorous force surged wildly. The force of heaven and earth in the surroundings began to pour into her body. She was preparing to break through. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 927. In this 1 month, she sparred with Rong Xiu almost every day, and her battle prowess increased at a speed visible to the naked eye. However, every time her battle prowess increased, Rong Xiu's battle prowess would increase as well, and he would always be able to suppress her. He seemed to be very clear about what level he should maintain his battle prowess at, so that he could stimulate her potential to the greatest extent without causing her any harm. But actually, this was the most terrifying part. This was enough to prove that Rong Xiu's control of force had reached an unimaginable level. Chu Luiyue did not believe it at first, but later on she realized in despair that Rong Xiu, she really could not detect his true strength. Every time she thought that she had found his weakness and could defeat him, she realized that he still had plenty of room to maneuver. Thus, slowly, Chu Luiyue also realized that it would take a long time before she could completely defeat him. But this did not affect her. Instead, it made her even more determined to fight. And gradually, she also realized that this kind of exchange of pointers was actually more effective than the bitter training in the Red Moon Desert. Compared to those puppets, Rong Xiu was much better in all aspects, and because he could use force, his battle prowess was stronger. Chu Luiyue thought about it day and night, pondering on how to defeat him by a move or two. Under such circumstances, her battle prowess had unknowingly increased by leaps and bounds, and she had been improving rapidly. So, after a month, she finally touched the threshold of a breakthrough. Previously in the Red Moon Desert, she had already broken through to the middle stage of the 6th level. If she broke through again now, she would be at the peak of the 6th level. Chu Luiyue held her breath and waited, calming her heart and looking inside. In her dantian, on top of the water droplet, 6 veins floated quietly. The first 5 veins were extremely beautiful, only the last one was slightly dim. The force that entered her body washed through the yuan meridians in her limbs and bones, and finally all gathered here. Like 100 rivers flowing into the sea, it continuously devoured the surging power. At the same time, the 5 treasures were connected, and the aura contained within was continuously increasing. Time passed quickly. At a certain moment, Chu Luiyue finally felt that the time had come. He gathered all the force in his dantian together and fiercely slammed it toward the water droplet. Boom! The 2 forces fiercely collided. Chu Luiyue's body exploded with a roar. After that, the sound of something breaking resounded. It was as if an invisible barrier had been broken. In the next moment, Chu Luiyue could clearly see that the 6th line seemed to have shed its gray layer, gradually revealing a gorgeous and intense color. A wave of fluctuation spread out from above. Chu Luiyue suddenly opened his eyes. His eyes, which were originally as black and clean as black jade, now seemed to be burning with 2 balls of fire. One was as red as the blazing sun. One was as transparent as the cold moon. It was as if the 2 forces had perfectly fused together, erupting with an unparalleled aura. At this point, the peak of the 6th step. Shang Guanyu had just walked out of Zhao Yu Hall when he sensed a terrifying aura erupting from it. He quickened his pace and walked inside. That power seemed to be coming from Yu Er's bedroom. In front of the tightly shut door stood a tall and straight figure. It was Rong Xiu. At this time, he was raising his hand to set up a layer of bounded domain outside the bedroom, which easily blocked all the fluctuations inside. Like raindrops falling into the sea, it did not cause any waves. Shang Guanyu's pupils shrank. Although he was not as talented as Yu Er, his strength was not bad. After recuperating during this period of time, he had returned to the peak of the 8th step. Otherwise, he would not have been able to ascend to the throne. But when he saw this scene, he suddenly realized that Rong Xiu's strength was definitely above his. And this also made him more convinced of his previous guess. Hearing the noise, Rong Xiu turned around. When he saw Shang Guanyu, he smiled slightly and bowed to him. Shang Guanyu looked at him with a complicated expression. Are you protecting Yue? Rong Xiu nodded. She has just broken through to the peak of the 6th step. Although he had expected this before, hearing Rong Xiu's confirmation with his own ears, Shang Guanyu was still quite excited. Really? He looked at the closed door with eager and proud eyes. He remembered that when Yu came back, she seemed to be only at the middle of the 6th step. He did not expect her to break through to the peak so quickly. During this period of time, thanks to your help, right? Shang Guanyu glanced at Rong Xiu and asked. He knew that Rong Xiu went to the palace at a fixed time every day to accompany Yu to practice. Obviously, Rong Xiu's contribution could not go unnoticed for Yu to be able to break through so smoothly. Rong Xiu's smile deepened. Her talent is outstanding. To her, this is not a difficult thing to do. His words and actions showed that he did not mean to take credit for himself. Shang Guanyu did not speak again. Breaking through from the middle of the 6th step to the peak seemed to be a small step, but in fact, there was a huge gap in the middle. Even cultivators with the Daijing Yuan meridian could not smoothly break through without at least half a year. Yu's speed was almost comparable to that of when she had the Tianjing Yuan meridian. During this period of time, he had secretly inquired about Yu's past. He learned that she was born a loser with a damaged Yuan meridian and reached this step in just a year. In comparison, her cultivation speed was even faster than that of the past. At this moment, with a creak, the door finally opened. Rong Xiu waved his sleeve, and the ward disappeared in an instant. It turned into countless light spots and quickly disappeared in midair. Shang Guanyu could not help but look at Rong Xiu again, and became more curious about his identity and background. Just what kind of powerful force could nurture such a person? These thoughts flashed through his mind, and Chu Luiwei had already walked out. She was a little surprised to see Shang Guanyu. Father? Shang Guanyu looked at her with relief. I haven't congratulated our Yu for breaking through again. Chu Luiwei's eyes were bright, and she was in high spirits. She took a few steps forward. Thank you, Father. What brings you here today? Shang Guanyu nodded and took out an invitation from his bosom. The Baiming dynasty sent a letter. Chu Luiwei's heart skipped a beat. It's coming. Digression, updated at 6:00 p.m. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 928. She reached out and took the letter, seemingly unintentionally asking, We don't have much contact with the Baiming dynasty. Why would they write us a letter? Shang Guanyu shook his head. I haven't opened it yet. Chu Luiwei glanced at the invitation. There was a line of words on it. To the Emperor of the Tianling dynasty. Her eyebrows twitched. The handwriting was exactly the same as the one on the note. She suppressed her racing heart and opened the invitation. It was an invitation. Chu Luiwei quickly finished reading and knitted her brows slightly. Shang Guanyu asked worriedly, What's wrong? Did something happen? Chu Luiwei handed the invitation over. The Baiming dynasty has invited the other 4 dynasties to Lin State. Why are we going to Lin State? Lin State was the capital of the Baiming dynasty. Although the dynasties in Heaven's Canopy occasionally communicated with each other, they didn't have much contact with each other. It was extremely rare to invite so many people from dynasty to the same place all of a sudden. Shang Guanyu asked as he read through the invitation. Immediately, he exclaimed in shock. The ancient Phoenix Mountain is opening? That's right. The letter said that the ancient Phoenix Mountain would open in half a month. They thought that the Baiming dynasty alone wouldn't be able to handle it, so they invited several dynasties to go together. Chu Luiwei frowned. The ancient Phoenix Mountain was a mountain outside Lin State City. It was where the Taizu of the Baiming dynasty tried to break through to the God realm. Unlike Shangguan Jing, their great ancestor had indeed succeeded in doing so back then. Since then, the entire ancient Phoenix Mountain had become the divine mountain of the Baiming dynasty. Although it was also something that happened 1,000 years ago, it was because of this that the entire Dark North dynasty seemed to be superior to others for many years. The surrounding dynasties were more polite to the Baiming dynasty. The invitation was written by the crown prince of the Baiming dynasty. I heard that he's the only son of the Baiming dynasty's old emperor. He's very talented and has always been favored. Now, half of the imperial power of the Baiming dynasty is in his hands. Shang Guanyu glanced at the letter and pondered for a moment. Regardless of whether it's for the ancient Phoenix Mountain or for the sake of the Dark North dynasty, the people from the other dynasties will probably go. Chu Luiyue nodded. That was what she thought too. Shang Guanyu pondered for a moment and asked doubtfully, however, the other three dynasties are all neighbors of the Baiming dynasty and they have frequent interactions with each other. Only our Tianling dynasty is far away from them, and we have almost never had such interactions with them before. Why would they write such an invitation? Chu Luiyue's eyes darkened. It turned out that the people who kidnapped Chu Ning were from the Dark North dynasty. Moreover, if he guessed correctly, the mastermind behind all of this was the so-called Prince Baiming, Jun Jiuqing. In the end, he was here for her. However, she had never been to the Baiming dynasty and did not know this Jun Jiuqing. Why would he do this? Whether it's right or wrong, we'll know when we go. Chu Luiyue said firmly. Shang Guanyu hesitated for a moment. Why don't I go on your behalf this time? Chu Luiyue shook her head. It says that the emperors of the various dynasties are invited to bring their people. They must already know that their daughter has ascended to the throne. If you go on their behalf, I'm afraid they will criticize you. Shang Guanyu was actually a little worried. But it was precisely because this letter was so obviously targeted that he had some misgivings. For some reason, he felt that this invitation was not friendly. Chu Luiyue saw the worry between his eyebrows and smiled. She raised her hand and smoothed the wrinkles between his eyebrows. All right. Father, are you still worried about your daughter's work? Moreover, they said that the ancient Phoenix Mountain was going to open this time, and they invited the various dynasties to bring some of their top experts and outstanding talents. With so many people going together, it would be a grand occasion. Nothing would happen. Shang Guanyu did not know whether to laugh or cry at her actions. You is smart. I'm not worried about anything you do. Since you've made up your mind, then pack up these few days and choose some people to go. Chu Luiyue nodded. When the ancient Phoenix Mountain opens, the rare treasures of heaven and earth will appear. I heard that there will be a force tide. It's an extremely rare cultivation opportunity for any cultivator. I don't want to miss it. Shang Guanyu looked at her serious expression and his heart skipped a beat. All right, you, just do whatever you want to do. I'll always be behind you and support you. The Dark North dynasty sent an invitation to Chu Luiyue to bring people to Lin province to witness the opening of the ancient Phoenix Mountain. Soon, the news spread among the various sects and families. Everyone was excited and eager to go. The Dark North dynasty was an existence that had produced a god-tier expert, and the ancient Phoenix Mountain was a precious place. Which cultivator in the world did not want to go and see it? In addition, people from several other dynasties would also go together, which made it even more grand. Even if it was just a look, it would be a precious life experience. To be able to meet so many top experts and outstanding geniuses, one could imagine how lucky it was. For a moment, the list of candidates became the focus of everyone's attention. Everyone wanted to know who Chu Luiyue would choose to go with her this time. In the study of Zhaoyu Palace. Chu Luiyue was sitting behind the table, flipping through the list that she had just written. The invitation said that she could bring a total of 10 people. 5 top experts, 5 outstanding geniuses. This number was actually not a small number. After all, other than the Tianling dynasty, people from the other 3 dynasties would also go. Needless to say, there would also be people from the Dark North dynasty. Since the quota was limited, the choice of the candidates became extremely important. Chu Luiyue first drafted a list for review. On one hand, the people going had to be strong enough. On the other hand, she had to leave enough people in West Hill in case someone started to cause trouble when she was not around. Moreover, there were so many spots in total. People from various sects and aristocratic families were also keeping a close eye on them, so she had to weigh the pros and cons. She stared at the list in her hand for a long while, then picked up her pen and made a few changes on it before settling on the final list. 10 days later, the Tianling dynasty was not close to the Dark North dynasty. Even if they used the teleportation portal, it would take a few days of travel time. Therefore, it was time for them to depart after briefing her on the matters in West Hill. She turned her gaze and looked at the invitation card next to her. Her expression turned serious. Jun Jiuqing, could it be that they used to know each other? A sound suddenly came from behind her. She turned around and saw that Dumpling had accidentally knocked a few books off the bookshelf. She got up, walked over, and picked up the books. When she picked up the last book, she was about to put it back in order when she realized that it was a little different. Chu Liuyue's heart skipped a beat, and she flipped open the book. Immediately, a look of shock flashed across her eyes. Her handwriting was on it. However, she had no recollection of writing these things. Digression, I'm a little stuck. The 5th update is around 6:30 p.m. Originally, I wanted to add more chapters today, but I had something to do at the last minute and had to go out. So, I'll add more chapters tomorrow. Chapter 929. Chu Liyue took a deep breath and carefully flipped through the book in her hand from the first page. As she flipped through the pages, the shock and doubt in her heart increased instead of decreasing. The things written on it seemed to be chaotic and incoherent, but there was a vague pattern to it. It was like some kind of secret language. Dumpling seemed to have noticed that something was wrong. It squatted aside obediently, looking at the book for a while and looking at her for a while. Its eyes were rolling. Chu Liyue stood there and spent quite some time before she finished reading the entire book. When she flipped to the last page, there was finally a signature that she could understand. Xan Yuan calendar, year 3572, return at the beginning of autumn. Chu Liyue stared at the line of words for a long time. Xan Yuan calendar, there was no such era name in the 1,000-year history of the Tianling dynasty. Moreover, as far as she knew, some of the surrounding dynasties did not have an era as long as 3,000 years. Then, the time recorded in this sentence, whose era name did it follow, and which day did it represent? Return at the beginning of autumn. Could this be referring to leaving on the day of autumn? But this was her handwriting, so where did it go? Chu Liyue's eyes seemed to be shrouded in a layer of fog, and she could not see clearly. She had a premonition that this book was most likely something like a diary. However, she couldn't remember when she had written these things down, nor did she know what the contents were. That sentence was written on the last page. Could it represent some kind of end? Chu Liyue was puzzled. She flipped through it repeatedly, but she had no clue. This was written by her, and she should be the one who put it here. However, she had no impression of it at all. Perhaps it has something to do with that memory? Chu Liyue muttered softly. At this moment, there was a fluctuation in her body. This fluctuation came from the top of the black pyramid. The seal on it was intact, and it seemed that something inside wanted to break out. Chu Liyue was shocked. This commotion seemed to be caused by the book in her hand? However, after a short while, the fluctuations stopped and returned to normal. Chu Liyue stood quietly and pondered for a long time. Taizu. She suddenly spoke. Little girl, what's the matter? Taizu's voice was clearly heard. Chu Liyue nodded. There's something I'd like to ask you. You said that the soul of the Shangguan clan was sealed in the black pyramid in my body? That's right. What happened? What I want to ask is, you should know who this soul belongs to, right? The Taizu suddenly fell silent. Chu Liyue felt as if his heart had been hammered by a heavy hammer. Her lips moved as she whispered, Don't worry. Inside is my soul, isn't it? The study fell into a dead silence. After Chu Liyue finished speaking, Taizu did not reply for a long time. Night fell, and a bright moon hung high in the sky. It gently waved and sprinkled in through the window, outlining the slender and tall woman's long shadow. The moonlight shone on her porcelain-like face, making it half bright and half dark. Her eyelids were slightly lowered, and the expression in her eyes was dark and gloomy, like a bottomless lake, mysterious and unfathomable. The cool night breeze blew, and the corners of her clothes fluttered. After an unknown period of time, Taizu finally let out a long sigh. Actually, I'm not 100% sure, but I vaguely feel that it seems to be. Chu Liwei was his descendant, so he was naturally the most familiar with this. When they first met, he knew that the soul of the Shangguan clan was sealed in the Black Pyramid. Otherwise, it would not have been able to break through the attack of the Long Yuan sword and enter below. At first, he only thought that it was the soul of a descendant and did not pay much attention to it. However, he gradually realized that it seemed to have something to do with Chu Liwei. However, because he did not have any evidence, he did not tell her. He did not expect her to bring it up this time. Did you discover something? Taizu asked. Chu Liwei nodded, then shook her head. I only caught a glimpse of the tip of the iceberg. If she had not flipped through the book and caused the Black Pyramid to move, she would not have thought of this. To think that she had been thinking that this might be an ancestor's? It's a pity that the seal on it is too strong, and I can't open it for the time being. Chu Liwei felt a little regretful, and she suddenly felt a little unwilling and puzzled. If this guess was true, then who was the one who specially stored it in this pyramid and hid it in the imperial tomb of Yaochen? Also, the first master had said that this thing was related to his wife and was only temporarily stored with her. What was going on? Since his wife was involved, it was impossible that he did not know what was inside, right? Chu Liwei suddenly felt an urge to see the first master again. She wanted to ask him personally what was going on in front of him. The person who left this seal is extremely powerful. Unless you break through to the 9th stage, you can only break it. Otherwise, Taizu actually had a headache. Chu Liwei was the descendant he doted on the most. If he could help her, he would definitely help her without holding back. Chu Liwei paused for a moment and put the book away. She would definitely solve all these mysteries. Knock knock. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Chu Liwei woke up from her thoughts and walked over to open the door. The person who came was Rong Xiu. At this time, it was already late at night. He was dressed in white and covered in cold moonlight. He looked at her, his eyes deep, as if they were sprinkling the sky with starlight. Chu Liwei blinked, then reacted and reached out to pull him. Rong Xiu, why are you here now? After receiving the invitation during the day, he left. She didn't expect him to come back at this time. Rong Xiu held her hand and strode into the study with his long legs. I'm here to bid you farewell, said Rong Xiu straightforwardly. Chu Liwei asked in surprise. Now, where are you going? Rong Xiu's lips curled up into a smile as he nonchalantly said, something happened in the clan and I need to go back to deal with it. So he was going back to his mother's clan? Chu Liwei felt as if a piece of her heart had been dug out. The two of them were separated more than they were together. It wasn't easy for them to be together for a month, but they were going to be separated again. Perhaps the disappointment in her eyes was too obvious. Rong Xiu tucked the strands of hair by her cheeks behind her ears, cupped her face, and planted a kiss on it. Don't worry, I'll go to the Dark North Dynasty to find you soon. Chu Liwei hugged his thin waist and said in a muffled voice. Really? Rong Xiu pinched her white and delicate earlobe and laughed softly, but his tone was gentle and doting. Of course. Someone was arrogant and presumptuous. How could he sit back and do nothing? When the time comes, I'll give you a big gift. Digression. Tomorrow is the diligent February. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 930. 3 days later, Chu Liwei selected her entourage and set off from Pingliang Square. There were a total of 10 people going with her this time. 5 of them were young talents from various families: Jian Fengqi, Yuan Jinghong, Mu Hongyu, Chang Wanzhou, and Wu Ming from Tianji residence. The other 5 were the most powerful people in Xiling: Chen Ku and Su Jin, the 2 elders from the royal family, Elder Xiai, Elder Shao Ran from Xingyan Palace, and Qin Yi. Of course, Qin Yi had already returned to his original name, Sin Yi. General Meng, after I leave, I'll leave Xiling to you. Chu Luiwei said to Meng Jingji solemnly. Meng Jingji cupped his fists. Don't worry, Your Majesty. He swore loyalty to the Tianling dynasty, so he would naturally do his best to keep this place safe. Chu Luiwei nodded and felt a little more at ease. She trusted Meng Jingji's character. Ever since the last big reshuffle, many positions in Xiling City had become vacant. For example, the Black Cavalry had lost their deputy general, Mu Qinghe, and they were like dragons without a leader. As for many other aspects, they were more or less lacking. This time, she had brought Elder Chen Ku and the others with her to the Dark North dynasty. This would undoubtedly lower the defense of the Western Hill. At this time, Meng Jingji was the best candidate to stabilize the situation. He had been able to suppress Shijiang for many years, so it wouldn't be a problem for him to deal with this. The most important thing was that he was indeed loyal to the Tianling dynasty. Don't worry. I'll definitely help you guard this place well. Sheng Guanyu said firmly. Chu Luiwei nodded. Although father is now the retired emperor, he has been on the throne for many years and is better at controlling these things than I am. She really had nothing to worry about. Please take care, father. We'll leave now. After Chu Luiwei finished speaking, she nodded at the person beside her. The transportation array started to spin slowly. Sheng Guanyu stepped forward. Be careful. I'll wait for your safe return. Chu Luiwei nodded vigorously at Sheng Guanyu. A strong light flashed. Everyone's figures instantly disappeared from the spot. Sheng Guanyu looked at the empty square with a solemn expression. I hope that everything will go smoothly this time. After entering the teleportation array, the surroundings were pitch black. Elder Chen took out a water pearl and lit up the space they were in. I wonder how long this trip will take us, Mu Hongyu muttered curiously. It'll take about 5 days. We'll pass through 4 transportation array formations. Yu. Yayu, isn't that further than the Great Desolate Swamp? She was Yayu's. The Tianling dynasty is very far from there, and the Baiming dynasty is about twice the size of the Tianling dynasty. Even if we reach their border, it'll take a lot of time to get to Lin province. I see. So this Baiming dynasty seems to be very powerful? Mu Hongyu wasn't from the Tianling dynasty, so she didn't know much about the Tianling dynasty, let alone the Baiming dynasty. She only learned a little about it after knowing that she was going with them. Before Chu Luiwei could say anything, Jian Fengqi chuckled and said lazily, There's a divine god in the Tianling dynasty. There's a great ancestor who's ascended to the god realm, so of course they think highly of themselves. Chu Luiwei touched his eyebrows and smiled. This is a fact. Among the surrounding empires, there aren't many who have stepped into the godly realm. The Dark North Empire is considered one of the best. It's a powerful empire with countless experts. No one can deny that. Who knows how many people want to join in the fun when the ancient Phoenix Mountain opens? It was a surprise that the Tianling dynasty was invited. Not to mention Dark North Empire, even the other 3 empires that were invited were not weak either. If it were in the past, they might have been able to compete. However, the Tianling dynasty had just gone through a shocking change. Countless people were implicated and punished. It could be said that the Tianling dynasty's vitality was greatly damaged. Therefore, among the 5 dynasties, the Tianling dynasty was expected to be at the bottom. However, Chu Luiwei didn't care much about that. She had come here mainly to rescue Chu Ning, and at the same time, to see what Jun Jiuqing was up to. Your Majesty is right. The ancient Phoenix Mountain is the place where the Taizu of the Baiming dynasty successfully broke through to level 9. It's now regarded as a sacred mountain because there are many rare treasures buried there, and there's a lot of origin power stored there. It's very beneficial to one's cultivation if you can go in and explore. This is a rare opportunity. You must seize it, Elder Chen Ku said earnestly to Jian Fengqi and the others. Although he didn't know why the Baiming dynasty suddenly invited them, it was still a rare opportunity. Chu Luiwei nodded and teased with a smile. I've been a princess for 20 years, but I've never encountered such an opportunity. Mu Hongyu asked curiously, Lu, Your Majesty, Will you be coming with us this time? Chu Luiwen knocked on her head. Just call me by my previous name. It's awkward to hear your majesty all the time. Mu Hongyu's eyes lit up. In fact, it took her a lot of effort to accept Chu Liuyue's true identity. Previously, she thought that they couldn't be like before because of their different identities. She was upset about it for a few days. Now that she heard her words, she was delighted. Then I'll call you that in private from now on, okay? Lu Yu said that he didn't mind, but she had to think about Lu Yu. After all, he was the emperor of the Tianling dynasty. He couldn't be the same as before. Chu Luiwen nodded with a smile. Okay. As for whether I'll come with you this time, it's not too late to decide when we get there. After passing through 3 transportation formations, they finally arrived at the border of the Baiming dynasty. A huge transparent curtain fell from the sky. Why do they have a heaven's canopy here? Mu Hongyu murmured. That's not a heaven's canopy. It's a barrier built by a Xian formation, Elder Chen Ke said in a deep voice. Mu Hongyu widened her almond-shaped eyes in shock. She had never seen a barrier of such a scale before. This is the pressure of a level 9 Xian formation, and there's definitely more than one. It's clearly formed by several connected formations. Elder Su Jin was the only female among the royal elders. She looked to be in her 30s. She was graceful and charming, but her personality was a little cold. But now, she couldn't help but be amazed. The Baiming dynasty really lives up to its name. She wasn't interested in other things, but she was obsessed with Xian formations. For a high-level Xian formation, she often studied it obsessively and didn't rest for dozens of days. Now that she suddenly saw such a formation, she naturally couldn't hide her excitement. She quickly patted Chu Liuyue's arm. It's rare to see a level 9 Xian formation. You have to take a look at it this time. Later, I'll rely on you to draw it from master to study. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 931. Chu Luiyue coughed. Master Su Jin, please restrain yourself. Elder Su Jin used to be one of her masters as a mystic cultivator. Back then, she was extremely obsessed with these things, but she didn't expect it to be even more so now. Hey, don't you always have a photographic memory of mystic formations? Just take it as master begging you, okay? Elder Su Jin put her palms together and gave Chu Luiyue a fawning smile, without any trace of her previous cold aura. This, Su Jin, if you really want to see it, I can also help you. How about we each memorize a portion? Xiao Ran, who had been very silent, couldn't help but speak up. His eyes were filled with eagerness as he looked at Elder Su Jin with an exceptionally gentle gaze. Elder Su Jin waved her hand and refused without even turning her head. No way, how can you and I remember it as clearly as you? Disappointment flashed across Xiao Ran's eyes, but it disappeared in an instant. In the end, she still looked at the barrier and memorized it diligently. Even if it was just a little help, it would be good, Chu Luiyue snickered inwardly. Xiao Ran was the #1 elder of Holy Flame Palace and also the strongest person in their sect. His status and prestige were even higher than the palace master of Holy Flame Palace. He had pursued Elder Su Jin for 20 years but had never succeeded. She didn't expect that he still hadn't given up until now. Don't worry, Master Su Jin, I'll remember it. However, if I want to study it thoroughly, I might have to ask Elder Xiao Ran for help occasionally. Xiao Ran glanced at Chu Luiyue gratefully. How could Elder Su Jin not know Chu Luiyue's thoughts? She tapped her nose. Sly. You were a level 8 mystic cultivator back then. What do you mean you don't understand? Chu Luiyue shrugged. Unfortunately, I'm not one now. Jian Fengqi finally couldn't help but glance at her. You have nothing to do with the word modest. Please wake up. Although she no longer had the Tianjing Yuan Meridian, this wouldn't affect her talent as a mystic cultivator. After so many years, the most talented mystic cultivator he had seen was Chu Luiyue. Otherwise, Elder Su Jin wouldn't have asked her for help. Chu Luiyue had a rare moment of embarrassment and surrendered with both hands. Give me 15 minutes. After she finished speaking, she raised her head and looked at the intersecting profound formations in front of her. The people around her also quieted down immediately. They followed her and watched while waiting for her to speak. A disdainful sneer came from behind them. These days, there are really all kinds of arrogant people. This barrier was jointly created by several level 9 mystic cultivators of the Baiming dynasty over a year. Ordinary people would feel dizzy just by looking at it a few more times. Yet, he actually wanted to memorize it completely? What a joke. Elder Su Jin and the others turned their heads to look, and saw that there was a group of people arriving right after them. The other party also had 11 people. The one who spoke was a young woman who looked to be in her 20s. She had a delicate appearance and was dressed in luxurious clothes. However, there was a hint of arrogance between her eyebrows. Elder Chen Ku glanced at her before his gaze landed on the middle-aged man standing at the front. He had an ordinary face with a full beard and looked rather dignified. There were dragon patterns on his sleeves and the corners of his clothes, making his identity clear. Rolly, don't be rude. The middle-aged man seemed to be reprimanding her, but his tone was still very gentle. It was obvious that he doted on this woman. The woman snorted. I'm just speaking the truth. I just can't stand some people putting on an act. Could it be that there really is someone in this world who can memorize a level 9 mystic formation with just one look? The middle-aged man didn't reprimand her again. It was obvious that he had the same thoughts as her. He shook his head with a helpless smile. When can you change your straightforward personality? Your Majesty, the eldest princess is right. We've just arrived at the border of the Baiming dynasty and she's already like this. Who knows how much worse it will be when we reach Lin province? A purple-robed young man helped to speak up. The middle-aged man shook his head. Be that as it may, the Baiming dynasty is someone else's territory after all. You should all restrain yourselves. No matter what, the other party was invited here just like us. Why make things awkward? With that, he looked at Chu Luiwei and the others again. Elder Chen Ku stepped forward. Chen Ku of the Tianling dynasty greets Emperor Huairan of the Taiyu dynasty. Tan Taichen looked at him in surprise, then smiled politely. So it's Elder Chen Ku of the Tianling dynasty. You know me? Elder Chen Ku's expression was calm. You came to Tianling 43 years ago. At that time, this old man had the chance to meet you. Tan Taichen's expression froze. He went to the Tianling dynasty that time for a marriage alliance. At that time, the Taiyu dynasty was slightly weaker than the Tianling dynasty. That was why he wanted to marry them. Unfortunately, he was rejected in the end. Since then, he felt humiliated and never went to Tianling again. Over the past few decades, the Taiyu dynasty's overall strength had surpassed Tianling. In addition to the things that happened in Tianling some time ago, they were naturally no match for them. I see. I don't remember these things clearly. He didn't pay attention to Elder Chen Ku at that time. After so many years, he naturally didn't remember him. However, I didn't know that the Tianling dynasty would come for the opening of the ancient Phoenix Mountain this time. Tan Taichen smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. I thought that you would be busy recently. There was a hint of mockery in his words. Elder Chen Ku's brows furrowed slightly. Soon after, he began to laugh. You're right. We've been busy recently, but since the Baiming dynasty sent an invitation, we naturally have to show some respect. There's no reason for us not to come. In other words, they were invited by the Baiming dynasty just like the Taiyu dynasty. Since they were all the same, there was no need to differentiate between them. Tan Taichen choked. His face was a little gloomy. He really didn't know that the Tianling dynasty would be invited. Logically speaking, the current Tianling dynasty didn't seem to have the right to be invited. However, only the people of the Baiming dynasty knew the answer to that. The Tianling dynasty? Is that the heavenly fate princess that's been making a lot of noise recently? Tan Tai Ruoli asked. She deliberately emphasized the words, heavenly fate princess. Back then, the news that the Tianling dynasty had a Tianjing Yuan meridian spread like wildfire. It was as if it was something amazing to have such a genius. Later, They also heard a lot about the heavenly fate princess. Most people talked about how outstanding she was. Who knew that in the end, she would be framed by her own fiancé and sister? How could she still be called the heavenly fate princess? It was just a joke. Elder Chenke heard her sarcasm and mockery. His expression changed slightly. Just as he was about to retort, Chu Luiwei had already retracted her gaze. She turned to look at them and smiled. Thank you for your concern. However, I'm no longer the heavenly fate princess. I'm the Tianling Emperor, Yuan Shi. Eldest Princess Tantai, please call me Emperor Yuan Shi. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 932. Although there was a smile on her lips, her black jade-like eyes were clear and cold. It was enough to send chills down one's spine. Tantai Ruoli and Chu Luiwei looked at each other and felt a chill run down their spines. In that instant, it was as if they had been completely seen through. The faint, majestic aura emanating from the other party actually caused her to feel fear. This was the true aura of an emperor. Although the Tianling dynasty was no match for Taiyu, Chu Luiwei was the emperor and Tantai Ruoli was the princess. There was a clear difference in status between the two of them. According to the rules, I am on the same level as Emperor Huairan. You should pay your respects to me when you see me. However, seeing that Tianling and Taiyu have dealings with each other and both of you are here in the Baiming dynasty, I'll let you off the hook. Chu Luiwei spoke casually. However, every word of his was using his status to suppress Tantai Ruoli. However, when you enter the Baiming dynasty and meet other people, I hope that eldest Princess Tantai will remember your status clearly. Otherwise, if you make a fool of yourself again, it might bring you a lot of trouble. Tantai Ruoli opened her mouth and wanted to retort, but her throat was so tight that she couldn't spit out a single word. Her chest felt unbearably tight. Her status was indeed a level lower than the other parties. Father! She stomped her feet and looked at Tan Taichen for help. Tan Taichen frowned and looked at her. That's enough, Ruoli. It didn't matter how willful she was usually, but now that they were in someone else's territory, she couldn't be so impudent. Although Chu Luiwei's words were unpleasant, they weren't without reason. Seeing that her father, who had always doted on her, wasn't speaking up for her, Tantai Ruoli could only obediently keep her mouth shut. However, she resented Chu Luiwei even more in her heart. Was he the emperor of Tianling? What was there to be proud of? How could the current Tianling compare to them? I'll teach her a lesson when we get to Linzhou. Chu Luiwei looked at the people around him. Let's go. Elder Su Jin's eyes lit up. Since she said so, it proved that she had already finished looking through all the Xian formations. Although he had changed his body, his talent did not decrease at all. Instead, it seemed to have become even stronger. Good. Let's go. Don't delay it because of some irrelevant people and things. The expressions of Tan Taichen and the others changed slightly. They didn't look good. These words were obviously referring to them. However, Chu Luiwei and the others clearly didn't care about their reactions. They didn't even spare them a glance. They walked forward. The soldier guarding the Xian formation said in a deep voice, "Please show me your invitation." Chu Luiwei took out the invitation card. With a slight movement of his finger, the invitation card flew out and landed on the barrier formed by the profound formation. A ripple spread out in all directions with the invitation card as the center. In the next moment, the barrier opened from the middle. One of the teleportation arrays inside was already starting to rotate slowly. Let's go! Chu Luiwei shouted and the few of them disappeared in an instant. That Shangguan Yu is so arrogant. Seeing that they had left, Tantai Ruoli couldn't help but laugh coldly. The rumors about her in the past were all very mysterious. If she was really that powerful, why would she be harmed in the past? I don't know how she came back and ascended to the throne, but she's so arrogant. Does she really think that she's invincible? That's right. She even said that she would memorize the level 9 Xian formation on the barrier in 15 minutes. What a joke! Even if she has a photographic memory, This profound formations level is extremely high, and it's extremely complicated. How could she remember it all? The young man beside him quickly agreed. Ruoli, it's not worth getting angry over this kind of person. When we get to Linzhou, we'll expose her in front of everyone. Let's see how arrogant she can be. Tantai Ruoli rolled his eyes and smiled. That's a good idea. Those who came to Linzhou this time are the most powerful people in each dynasty. When the time comes, she'll definitely be humiliated. Tan Taichen didn't comment on that. In fact, he didn't like that Shangguan used words and actions. In addition, he had some grudges against the Tianling dynasty. Naturally, he didn't want to be on good terms with them now. He turned around, glanced at them, and said faintly, "Don't worry. These are all small matters. You just have to be careful. Don't forget that the most important thing this time is to wait for the opening of the ancient Phoenix Mountain. Ruoli, especially you're only one step away from becoming a level 8 warrior. You don't have to take this opportunity to break through. If you can get a great opportunity and go up a few levels, then your future will be limitless." Tantai Ruoli patted her chest confidently. "Father, don't worry. This time I'll make you proud. I'll let them know who the top genius is." Tan Taichen nodded in satisfaction. "Let's go." They entered from the boundary at the border. This was the last teleportation array. From here, they could reach Linzhou directly. After waiting for a while, a light spot finally appeared in the darkness ahead. Elder Chenke said in a deep voice, "We're almost there." As soon as he said that, the atmosphere suddenly changed subtly. Some were nervous, and some were looking forward to it. After all, none of them had been to the Baiming dynasty before, let alone Linzhou. When they thought about the competition with the people from the other dynasties, they couldn't help but feel excited. The light in front of them became brighter and brighter until a strong pressure came from all directions. A group of people rushed out of the teleportation array one after another. The light flashed in front of them, and they finally felt that they were stepping on solid ground. Chu Luiwei stood still and looked ahead. A majestic city stood in front of them. Behind it, there was an endless mountain range, like a giant beast lying on the ground. Its aura was astonishing. Even though he was standing so far away, he could still clearly feel that terrifying pressure. Chu Luiwei took a deep breath. That's the ancient Phoenix Mountain. At the same time, in the Baiming Palace. In the blue lake, a small boat floated gently. On top of it, a person was reclining, looking carefree and unfettered. A gentle breeze blew. He chuckled, seeming to be a little drunk. His voice was hoarse and decadent, like a hook that tickled people's hearts. "It's finally here. Digression. Continue at 6 p.m. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network." Chapter 933. As his voice fell, he pushed the boat with one hand and his figure floated up like a swan. The indigo brocade robe drew an arc in the air. From afar, it looked like an elegant ink painting, reflecting the sky and the water. However, the trace of red at the end of his hair was a strong and bright stroke, as if it wanted to break free from this tranquil and peaceful painting. Coo coo, a strange bird's cry was heard. In the sky, there was a white bird that was flying over at high speed. The bird was not big, and its body was snow-white. Only its claws and head were ink-black. It should have looked soft and cute, but it had a sharp red beak and sharp and cold eyes, which added a bit of fierceness to it. It flapped its wings and landed directly on Jun Jiuqing's right arm. "You're too late. I already know." He laughed in a low voice. He naturally knew that she was coming the fastest. From the moment she walked out of the teleportation array and arrived at Lin City, he already knew. These words seemed to make the bird a little disappointed, and the fierceness in its eyes became stronger. "All right, I's in a good mood today. I will give you the reward you deserve." Hearing his words, the bird became excited again. It flapped its wings anxiously as if it could not wait. Jun Jiuqing tilted his head slightly and said lazily, "Go and bring a beginner of the 7th rank for it. Soon, A guard appeared by the lake and respectfully knelt on one knee. Yes. By the way, throw away the previous ones. Kill a fresh one for it today. The guard was a little surprised, but it seemed that this was not the first time he had experienced such a thing. He immediately reacted. This subordinate obeys. Coo-coo. Only then did the bird call eagerly and fawningly. With a shake of Jun Jiuqing's arm, it flew into the air. Soon, the figure of the guard and the bird disappeared without a trace. Jun Jiuqing stood quietly on the boat with one hand behind his back for a moment. Men. 2 guards ran out together. Your Highness, what orders do you have? How are the preparations for the things I asked you to do? Don't worry, Your Highness. This subordinate has prepared everything. That's fine. A distinguished guest had arrived, so naturally, they had to receive him well. As Jun Jiuqing spoke, he raised his head slightly and looked in a certain direction. You really made I wait for too long. After Chu Luiwei came out, the others also came out one after another. Looking around, there was a group of armored soldiers guarding the area around the teleportation array plaza. 2 men stood in front of the teleportation array. One was tall and muscular, while the other was slightly skinny. The 2 of them stood side by side, but one of them was stronger than the other. They were clearly wearing the same official robes, but the thinner man was clearly shorter than the burly man next to him. It looked like they were waiting for someone. After Chu Luiwei and the others came out, the 2 of them looked over. Shock flashed across the duo's eyes when they saw Chu Luiwei, who was standing right in front of the group. Even the soldiers guarding the teleportation array could not help but take a few more glances at her. There were countless beautiful women in the world. However, there were very few who were as beautiful and noble as this woman. Needless to say, her facial features were perfect, but the most moving thing was the aura between her eyebrows. She was cold and bright, with an unattainable noble aura. At first glance, she was as bright as the sun in the clouds, but at second glance, she was as beautiful as the cold moon. She was truly a beauty that could topple cities. After a moment, the burly man reacted first, and an eager smile appeared on his face. However, before the smile could fully spread, he seemed to have suddenly thought of something, and his expression froze. His expression changed very quickly, but Chu Luiwei still saw it clearly. She narrowed her eyes slightly. The man spoke hesitantly. I am Yin Hao, and I have been ordered to wait here. May I ask if you are all from the Tianling dynasty? Chu Luiwei nodded slightly. I am from the Tianling Shangguanyu. A look of I knew it flashed across the man's eyes. Then, the smile on his face reappeared, but it was much more polite and distant, and the smile did not reach the corners of his eyes. Honorable guests, you have come from afar, and I apologize for not welcoming you. Wen Fan, what are you waiting for? Hurry up and invite our honorable guests into the city. The thin man next to him glanced at him, as if he wanted to say something, but he swallowed his words in the end. Then he took a few steps forward and bowed respectfully to Chu Luiwei and the others. I am Wen Fan, and I will be in charge of all your matters in Lin City this time. If you have any questions, please let me know. So, he was in charge of receiving the guests. Chu Luiwei nodded in understanding. The person who was sent to do this must have a high status in the Baiming dynasty. However, judging from the situation just now, Yin Hao seemed to be much more powerful than Wen Fan. Chu Luiwei smiled slightly. All right, then I will have to trouble Lord Wen for a period of time. Wen Fan did not expect Chu Luiwei to be so polite. He was flattered and quickly waved his hand. You are too kind. This is what I should do. His Highness the Crown Prince has already made arrangements for your accommodations. Please follow me into the city gates. Chu Luiwei looked calm and nodded slightly. The other party had come for her from the beginning, so it was not surprising that they had prepared these accommodations in advance. She did not say much, but called out to Elder Chen Ku and the others. The group then followed Wen Fan to the city gate. However, as soon as they stepped out of the teleportation formation, there was another fluctuation behind them. Chu Luiwei turned around to take a look. As expected, Tan Taichen and the others had arrived. Yin Hao saw them and immediately went to greet them happily. Emperor Huairan, you are finally here. I have been waiting for you for a long time. Tan Taichen looked at him. You are? Yin Hao bowed respectfully, his face full of eagerness. My name is Yin Hao. I'm here to take care of all your affairs in Linzhou City. His Majesty said that you will not be here for a long time, and he misses you very much. He even wants to play a game of chess with you. Tan Taichen finally understood and laughed. Since I am here this time, I will have a good time. Yin Hao raised his arm. This way please. After that, he bowed and led the way in front. I thought that he was a powerful person just now, but it turns out that he is just a servant who is used to judging others. Mu Hongyu said with disdain. Yin Hao saw them just now, and he was very cold and noble. It was difficult for him to even smile. Now that he saw Tan Taichen and the others, he was completely different. Aren't you afraid that your mouth will crack from smiling? Chu Luiyue smiled carelessly. There is nothing strange about that. Our Tianling is indeed a little inferior to the current Taiyu. If we can get on their good side, we will naturally benefit a lot. She turned her gaze and looked at Wen Fan. This person seemed to be used to being bullied. Digression, I am a little stuck, and I will take my time to grind it out. Later on it will be slower. Everyone, please show your impatience. Chapter 934. Don't worry about them. Let's go first. Chu Luiyue retracted his gaze and walked forward. When Wen Fan heard this, he hurriedly reacted and led the way in front. This way please. Below the square, there were 2 teams on each side of the square. They seemed to be here to pick people up. There were several carriages in each team. The one in front was the most luxurious. The ones behind it were slightly less luxurious, but they were still very luxurious compared to ordinary carriages. There was a totem engraved on each of the carriages. They were obviously prepared by the Baiming royal family. There were 2 top-notch carriages at the very front, both of which were pulled by 8 blue-scaled horses. The blue-scaled horses were 7th-grade magical beasts. They were considered to be of high quality, so they were very valuable. The fact that the Baiming dynasty could send so many of them to pull the carriages showed how powerful their country was. What was slightly different was that among the 8 blue-scale horses on the left, one of them had an extremely pure color. Under the sunlight, it actually shone like an azure sea. It was obviously about to break through. Of course, it was more valuable than the others. Wen Fan was about to walk to the team on the left when Yin Hao's voice came from behind him. Wen Fan, are you going to sit in the team on the right? Although it was a question, his tone was clearly in order. Wen Fan frowned. He turned around to look at him and said, according to the numbers, the team on the left is number 4, and the one on the right is number 5. We should be sitting in number 4. Yin Hao, however, laughed out loud. Isn't it just a number? The first 3 teams have already left. There are only 2 teams left. What's there to split? We'll take the one on the left. Wen Fan was a little angry. He had tolerated him before, but now he wanted to snatch the carriages. He didn't care if he was bullied, but if he backed down now, wouldn't he drag the people of the Tianling dynasty down with him? His voice became colder. Yin Hao, we all know the principle of first come, first served. Moreover, the people of the Tianling dynasty came first. Naturally, you should sit in number 4. Yin Hao was refuted in front of everyone. He felt that he had lost face and his face turned ugly. Didn't you hear what I said just now? His Majesty is waiting to play chess and catch up with Emperor Huairan. If it's delayed, can you bear the responsibility? Wen Fan sneered in his heart. Their mission today was to pick up the people here and settle them down. If he wanted to see His Majesty, he had to wait until tomorrow. Using this as an excuse, he was clearly trying to snatch the item. No! It's just a group of carriages, what's there to fight over? Since Emperor Huairan is in a hurry, then this consort will take a step back. Before Wen Fan could finish his words, Chu Luiyue, who was beside him, smiled and spoke. Because of this sentence, a crack appeared in the originally hostile atmosphere. Everyone turned to look at him. Who couldn't tell that the fight for the carriage was a fight for status? Was she really going to admit defeat so easily? When Fan could not help but remind him in a low voice. Do you really want to do this? Chu Liwei didn't seem to care about the gazes around him. Her eyes curved into crescents as she smiled brightly. That's right. Anyway, we're not in a hurry today, so what's the harm in taking a step back? We're all here for the invitation, so isn't it good to be happy? Why make things unpleasant over such a small matter? After hearing this, everyone felt that Chu Liwei was really afraid of Taiyu dynasty, which was why she was willing to compromise. For a moment, a trace of disdain appeared on many people's faces. They had heard that the Tianling dynasty had suffered a great loss, and now it seemed that it was true. They hadn't even officially entered Linzhou City, and they were already being bullied like this. Wouldn't they be trampled on in the future? This Shangguan, you didn't seem like a good person. Tan Taichen smiled and cupped his hands. Then this consort will thank you in advance. Chu Liwei smiled and nodded, as if she really didn't care. Then, Tan Taichen led his people to the fourth carriage. Tantai Ruoli sneered and glanced at Chu Liwei disdainfully when she brushed past her. It seems that some people really don't understand that even if they're all emperors, there's still a difference between them. Shangguan, you didn't deserve to be mentioned in the same breath as them. Chang Wanzhou's wrist twitched slightly, as if he was about to attack. Chu Liwei glanced at them and signaled them to calm down. The silent and oppressive atmosphere made them even more sullen. When Fan looked apologetic and said in a low voice, "I'm sorry. It's all my fault for being too incompetent," Chu Liwei shook her head and walked toward the carriage on the right. Let's go too. Tan Taichen and the others quickly reached the most luxurious carriage. Just as he was about to get in, he heard a clear voice again. Emperor Huairan, please wait. Tan Taichen turned his head and saw Chu Liwei standing beside the carriage and looking over with a smile. This consort has never been to Lin province before and has never met anyone from the Dark North imperial family. This time, Emperor Huairan wants to meet the Dark North Emperor first to play chess and chat with him. For the sake of this carriage, please introduce this consort to him and put in a few good words. This way, when we officially meet in the future, this consort can have a few more words with him. Tan Taichen was stunned. He didn't say that he would enter the palace today. After all, the Dark North Emperor's status was slightly higher than his, and he wasn't someone he could meet just because he wanted to. Now that Shangguan Yu said this, wouldn't it be inappropriate if he didn't go today? But this carriage had already been snatched. He vaguely felt that he had jumped into the trap that the other party had dug. He couldn't jump, but he also could not jump. Digression, I'm not sure about the time. Sorry. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from AI Network. Chapter 935. Tan Taichen was inwardly annoyed. This Shangguan Yu might look harmless on the surface, but who knew that she was full of evil tricks? The moment she said those words, she left him with no way out. Her meaning was clear. When she met the Dark North Emperor, she would definitely bring up today's matter. Although it felt good to snatch a good carriage, it wouldn't be nice if others knew about it. Tan Taichen gritted his teeth. Seeing that he didn't say anything, Chu Liwei blinked and teased him with a half-smile. What? Is Emperor Huairan unwilling to help with such a small matter? Tan Taichen had no choice but to say, why would I? It's just a small matter. I'll help if I can. However, I'm not feeling well today. Whether I'll go to the palace to meet you is another matter. Yin Hao hurriedly said, Emperor Huairan must be exhausted from the long journey, right? I'll send you to your residence to rest first. With this excuse, Tan Taichen's expression improved. He nodded and boarded the carriage. When the curtain fell, it blocked the view of Chu Liwei and the others. Tan Taichen heaved a sigh of relief. He leaned against the wall of the carriage and frowned in annoyance. This Shangguan Yu doesn't seem to be as easy to deal with as it seems. After these two confrontations, the two sides could be considered to have formed a grudge. Today, she made a fuss about the carriage incident. Who knows what she'll do in the future? It's better to be on guard. After Tan Taichen boarded the carriage, Tan Tai Ruoli and the others also boarded the carriages behind. Let's go. At Yin Hao's command, the carriages drove toward the city gate. However, no matter how one looked at it, it seemed like they were fleeing. When Fan looked at Chu Luiwei in surprise. Although the new emperor of the Tianling dynasty looked to be only 16 or 17 years old, she seemed to be quite scheming and resourceful. She was able to talk and laugh in front of so many people and force that old fox Tan Taichen to the point of speechlessness. Normal people couldn't do that. He couldn't help but change his opinion of Chu Luiwei. His attitude became more respectful, and he wanted to apologize with an apologetic expression. I'm to blame for this matter, it's not your fault. Chu Luiwei glanced at the carriage in the distance and smiled faintly. They're just trying to intimidate me. Without Tan Taichen's connivance, Yin Hao would not dare to rob her openly no matter how arrogant he was. Unfortunately, I don't fall for that trick. This time, she would give them a small counterattack. If Tan Taichen was tactful and behaved himself, she would let it go. But if they didn't, when that time comes, they would. All right, let's get going. Chu Luiwei said as she got into the carriage. Elder Chen Ku and the others got into the carriage one after another. Then, she lifted the curtain and glanced at Wen Fan. By the way, since we're in Lin City, you'll be in charge of all our affairs. Then I have a request. Wen Fan straightened his body subconsciously and asked respectfully, please say it. Wen Fan will do his best. Chu Luiwei's red lips curled slightly. It's not a difficult request. But if the same thing happens again, you don't have to worry. Just fight back. I'll bear the consequences. She came to Linzhou City to rescue her father from the tiger's den, not to be wronged and bullied by others. Wen Fan was startled by the coldness between her eyebrows. Suddenly, he felt as if he had eaten a tranquilizer in his heart. Chu Luiwei's lips curved into a smile as she looked up at the towering city gate in the distance. Let's go. After passing through the city gate, the carriages continued to move forward. Tan Taichen sat in the carriage with his eyes closed, deep in thought. Gradually, he heard all kinds of noises around him. It was very lively. They must have entered a bustling city. However, the noises made Tan Taichen even more frustrated. He wanted to relax and have a good rest in the carriage, but the scene just now kept replaying in his mind. He was checkmated by a mere Shangguanyu. He felt so aggrieved no matter how he thought about it. Initially, he only wanted to teach them a lesson and let them know who they could and could not afford to offend. However, he didn't expect that Shangguanyu would take advantage of the situation to make a fuss. Before he even got into the carriage, she had already thought of a way to complain to the Dark North Emperor in front of everyone. If he had known, he wouldn't have snatched the carriage. What a waste of time. At this moment, the carriage finally stopped. Yin Hao's voice came from outside. Your Majesty, we've arrived. You may get off the carriage. Tan Taichen shook his head and threw the messy content to the back of his mind. Then, he lifted the curtain and got off the carriage. After he stood still, he raised his head and looked in front of him. When he saw the situation in front of him, he was surprised. This is, Your Majesty, this is the resting place that the Crown Prince ordered for all of you to prepare. Yin Hao said with a fawning expression. This time, we prepared a total of 4 courtyards in the palace. Each of the 4 great empires will live in one. However, this is the most spacious and luxurious of the 4 courtyards. Back then, there were quite a few ancestors who had lived here. Not to mention, the Crown Prince personally ordered people to renovate it a few years ago. This place can be said to be the best one. When Tan Taichen saw the extraordinarily luxurious door, he already knew that this courtyard was extraordinary. When he heard this, he couldn't hide his excitement. This is the Crown Prince's special place for me? Of course. Yin Hao smiled fawningly. If it wasn't specially designated, those who came earlier would have already moved in. Obviously, this place was reserved for the Taiyu dynasty. In fact, the 2 dynasties that came earlier were stronger than the Taiyu dynasty. Unfortunately, he couldn't beat the other two and had to compete with Wen Fan in the end. He didn't expect this place to be reserved for them by the Crown Prince. This was really a stroke of luck. Although Yin Hao didn't know why the Crown Prince would do this, he was still very happy. As long as he could serve them well, he would be able to achieve great things in the future. Please, Yin Hao said eagerly. Tan Taichen looked calm. However, the slight smile on his face and the expectant look in his eyes revealed that he was very excited and happy about this matter. Normally, an emperor wouldn't be too interested in the place where other emperors lived before. However, this place was different. This was the courtyard where the emperor of the Baiming dynasty lived before. To him, this was no doubt an intangible honor. If he could live in this courtyard, he would be respected in front of the other empires. He straightened his clothes and walked forward with his head held high. However, he was stopped when he reached the door. Clang. 2 spears crossed each other. The guard in charge of guarding the door said coldly, "I'm sorry, this place is not reserved for you." Digression, translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation that you're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.